The evening metropolis was filled with people staring at their gadgets, heading home after the day's hustle and bustle or just taking a walk. The live streaming room was beginning its launch. The man in the business suit spoke as if he were telling off his wife. It was late in the evening, but he clearly didn't like the fact that she was just coming home at this late hour. But there must be a reason for everything. What's the girl's reason? The girl was not a timid one. She was not willing to rely on anyone else in her affairs but herself. She had a daughter to provide for. Who else would do it but her? The conversation was reaching its peak. It was about divorce. The girl was tired of today, and now she had to argue with her husband and drive. That kind of talk never leads to anything good. The girl was blinded by the light of an oncoming car. Through the stress of her life, she was trying to control herself, but the light was so bright you couldn't see anything. So she drove her car into the ditch. Her husband's words were still coming through the earpiece. He realized something was wrong and tried to call out, but it was all in vain. A young mother and her daughter had flipped over in their own car, failing to control their driving. Their bodies were bleeding, and their outcome was decided. But in any case, welcome to the Afterlife Live broadcast room. This place was like hell. There was no sun, but instead, lava was bubbling. Instead of picturesque forests and grass, there were rocks and majestic cliffs. 3 men could be spotted on the desolate terrain. They were interestingly dressed, with long caps on their heads and their bodies clad in white kimonos. Their hairstyles favored long hair. This Jiang Lin is a white spirit who takes souls to the realm of the dead at an early stage. Jinlin was chosen to be the host of the live broadcast. Now he could win rewards and cultivate because of it. And also, a task from the live broadcast was given out to promote the afterlife cultivation, thus cultivating. The introductory task was to invite 10,000 viewers to his broadcast. Jianlin could have refused the building, but he didn't, and accepted it. Right now, he could start it. In fact, he wasted no time and started it. The live broadcast began as he usually introduced himself as a spirit taking souls. To promote the afterlife culture, Jian would broadcast his daily work live. Of course, people didn't believe in such a thing even close. They thought it was just special effects or some kind of entertainment show. But the spirit began to prove otherwise. However, he didn't want to debate for long and decided to proceed with the next one. To his main task, Jianlin would be demonstrating the entire soul transfer process right now. The accident and its live broadcast all happened on the same day, and accordingly the spirit went to that place. For 3 hours there was a huge pool of blood, and near the overturned car the police were taking statements. Dudu was completely frightened, as if she couldn't realize what had just happened. The spirit was heading towards her and called her by name. Mom was lying on the couch, being held by the doctors. Perhaps her chances of living were higher than her daughter's. But Dudu didn't pay any attention to Jianlin at all, as if he was a ghost. Then he simply took her hand and proceeded to tell her about his work. The first step of transferring the soul is to transfer it to the bridge. And then you have to drink a special soup. But the girl didn't want to go with the spirit at all. She focused completely on her mom and let go of the spirit's hand. Dudu turned around and started calling for her mother in tears. But she didn't want to go anyway and wanted to stay with her mom. Jianlin was walking in the other direction, and Dudu was walking in the opposite direction, and as if she was a ghost, she passed through the spirit. The girl was ready to do anything but leave her mother. She was probably not afraid for herself, but for her. Jianlin paid attention to this and reacted quite calmly. Many people do not want to leave after death, and the resulting strong energy is called ghosting. In his right hand, the spirit held a mourning wand. It has the effect of banishing ghosts, usually good at suppressing the occurrence of ghosts. It was obvious that he didn't feel good about using that wand, but the situation forced him to. It was long and made of white material, so it didn't look intimidating. Dudu was still standing by her mother's couch. But when the spirit pointed his wand toward her face, it was impossible not to pay attention. The previously large red eyes were a different color. They were dark blue and not so thirsty. She should have calmed down, because if she insisted on staying with her mother, she would kill her. Dudu understood and took her little hand from her mother's blanket. Shu Yan will still live and things will get better, but it's time for Dudu to leave her. Little Dudu knew she was doing the right thing, but it was hard not to turn around for one last look at her mother. Everyone has 7 emotions and 6 desires. If the soul does not want to leave, it is necessary to find a way to untie its knot. The audience continued to watch the broadcast. Some of them were very encouraged, and some were still trying to figure out what the broadcast was about. The programmer's admin rights disappeared and they couldn't track where the broadcast was coming from. But after a while it came to them that it was a live broadcast because of the detailed world. Doo-doo. The little girl was already a step away from the other world and was saying goodbye to the spirit. The process of sending souls was tedious for Jianlin, but it couldn't be helped. Work was work. Now it was time for him to go get the second soul. Jianlin continued to broadcast live and headed towards the room, towards the iron doors. In his hand he held a small blue-colored book. As if through a portal, he passed through the window, still scrutinizing the book. The room he entered was occupied by an old man and a little boy. The grandfather, already in his old age, was sitting by the boy's bedside, watching him with a smile. In 20 minutes, this old man is going to die. Now we can watch him to see what he will do before he dies. The grandfather loved his grandson, and so he was with him his last moments. After one last look at his grandson's young face, the old man smiled sadly. With care, he adjusted the blanket that was protecting his grandson from the cold, as if trying to keep him warm. Carefully, trying not to make any noise, the old man opened the closet and took out his black jacket, and then he threw it over himself. He was going somewhere. It seemed like one of his routine trips. Probably neither he nor his family would expect him to leave this world today. He went to the bathroom and also washed his face with cold water. Wood combed his gray hair, looking sadly at his reflection in the mirror. He was in no hurry to leave, so first he decided to sit down comfortably and picked up his cell phone. He called his son to warn him to come back tomorrow. The son and Xiaorong would work things out. The father believed it and told his son. But he was not in the mood for conversation and tried to end it as quickly as possible and turned off. Jianlin was still waiting for the moment. The grandfather had changed his mind about going out and decided to spend the evening with his grandson and settled down beside him. Grandpa wished all the best for his grandson, whom he sweetly called Monkey. He wanted him to be happy, healthy, and to study well. And the monkey promised that he would dedicate his awards to his grandfather. Of course, such a promise could not fail to please, and my grandfather was over the moon at the promise. Satisfied with his grandson, the old man fell asleep like that and smiled. What was in store for him began to come to fruition as it should. His soul leaves his body, which means the man dies. In any case, it is a dignified death for him. The old man was indeed now a spirit and had no physical shell. Jianlin ordered him to go with him without ceremony. Everyone has the same path after death. First the bridge, then the soup, and then reincarnation. This he repeated to every dying person. Yay! The goal was met. The number of live viewers reached 10,000. The host was popularizing the afterlife culture and was given 100 points for doing so. Jianlin had more than 100 points, and for that, he was now given a trading block. The spirit was beyond surprised as the audience had gathered quite easily. He hadn't even made much effort. Today's task was successfully completed by the spirit. He could continue the broadcast, or he could end it. And naturally, he didn't want to continue it. One live broadcast caused a lot of emotions and disagreements between people. It was hard for them to understand where is the truth and where is the fake. Due to the live streaming, the website exploded. The number of hits skyrocketed and the pressure on the system was too high. As a result, some live streaming rooms on the website could not be accessed, causing inconvenience to most users. The technical department has still not been able to access where exactly the live broadcast is coming from, and the live broadcast itself has not been saved either. The technical department could not control this live broadcast room. The police could not find any information. There were suspicions that it was a hacker, but I had to pass the information to my superiors. Maybe they'll monitor everything. The technical department had to wait for the continuation. A woman who was injured in a traffic accident was lying unconscious in the hospital. Her husband was sitting at her feet, looking at his smartphone. He was reading the news and one of the breaking news stories hit his feed. A teenager inherited his family's estate, amounting to tens of millions, all for his grandmother's dream. The grandmother told the man to give him the deeds to the property. The portrait of a certain person made the man worry, as if he recognized him. According to investigators, this man was not only at the scene of the accident, but also took Dudu's soul. That's what the police told him. It was known that the second person who was next to him died a natural death in his home. Thoughts came to mind that it was as if this man really wasn't lying, and the broadcasts were really coming from the afterlife. But such a truth was very difficult to accept. Naturally, it was shocking. As if from a nightmare, the woman woke up with huge black bags under her eyes, and breathing as if she had just jogged. Zhu Yan woke up, but for some reason her husband looked more worried than happy. Tears were shining from her eyes, and her face and hair were a little ragged. She looked like a madwoman. But she was speaking quite deliberately, and now she was saying that she had found a way to see Duda. In the next instant, she lifted the phone with her hand. She found the healing lounge of the Afterlife, and then clicked the join button. The Afterlife Healing Lounge had a popularity of 102,225 people. Grandmother turned to Jianling with gratitude. Thanks to this spirit, her grandson's wish was realized. But the spirit answered as if it was something she had to do. After thanking Jianling, Granny vanished into thin air. The popularity of the live broadcast soared, for this spirit received 500 points, and another 300 for the fulfillment of a dream. After that, he hurriedly ended the live broadcast. It was as if he was bored with it all. Before the popularization of afterlife culture, there were only 100 items, but now there are over 300. Is it all due to the popularity of live broadcasting, or has people's perspective changed? Jianlin opened a store where one could see the classification of goods. There were basic cultivation items, the yin pill, basic cultivation items, intermediate cultivation items, advanced cultivation items. At this moment, the yin pill would help a spirit ascend to the ghost soldier stage. There was nothing to lose, so Jianlin decided to give it a try. One such pill was worth 600 points, and it gave experience. After taking it, it would help one make a breakthrough to the next stage of cultivation. An important reminder is to accumulate points by completing as many quests as possible. And as a consequence, unlock more advanced items for cultivation. Something purple and ephemeral glowed around the spirit body, as if it was narrating his promotion. The ghost level is the lowest among the wandering souls, followed by ghost soldiers, ghosts, great ghosts, and ghost kings. Each level is divided into early, middle, and late stages. Jianlin's cultivation had been upgraded to the ghost soldier stage. It's worth becoming a great ghost to be able to make your own decisions and even have a baby. There were many notifications coming from the live broadcast, especially from Dudu's mother, and the spirit balance was getting bigger and bigger every time. It was now 5,100 human currency. One human currency was 50 coins. Jianlin could receive rewards without live streaming. The balance was now at 15,100 human currency, and Dudu's mother was relentlessly asking for a meeting. Jian remembered that girl. She had only died 3 days ago. If she didn't have time to drink the soup, a meeting wouldn't be difficult. Jianlin sent a message to Dudu's mother. For the first 7 days, prepare incense, burn it, and draw a string to the door. My mother's gratitude was unbounded. She read the message with tears in her eyes, and promised that she would deal with everything and would not miss such a chance. But her husband was not in the mood at all and angrily took away her phone. If she wanted to pray for Dudu, he was willing to take her to the temple. But what she was about to do seemed crazy to him. However, she wasn't in the same mood either. The couple's relationship wasn't loving at all, and it was evident in the way they treated each other. It seemed as if the woman was disgusted to be in the same room with this man who was her husband. So she took off the anesthesia and left the room in a hurry. He may not have wished her harm and had a very different outlook on this life, but it caused many disagreements between them. Specialists were at the scene of the Dudu girl's death 7 days later. Team A was ready. If any suspicious persons were found, they would subsequently be arrested immediately. The photographer was about to take pictures instead of the accident and asked his co-worker to keep the noise down. It was almost 12 o'clock and the host was still gone. Did he run away with the money? People should have made an appointment during the live broadcast. The photographer saw something he had been waiting for so long, but had never seen. Fortunately, the camera was already on and he was able to capture something. Her mother and father placed incense directly to Dudu's place of death, and her soul actually appeared. The photographer only saw the parents, so the coworker had to show where Dudu herself was. Her silhouette was visible through the camera. She was on a haze of incense like she was in the clouds. Looking closer, you can see her lost look, eyes full of sadness and yet ghostly hope. Little Dudu came in a place with the spirit of Jianlin. He accompanied the girl, but his face didn't have the usual indifference, but rather sadness and sympathy for people. The people could see all the greatness and power of the spirit, for they could not have imagined such a thing. And right now they were in awe of that power and afraid of it. There were 1,689 spectators in the healing parlor of the afterlife. Dudu spotted her parents and asked the spirit for permission to approach them. She had twinned with Jianlin and called him brother, and he was happy to help her, and now let her go. Dudu could see her parents, but they couldn't see her. The parents could only feel her presence or watch her through the camera. In order for the meeting to be complete and for the family to socialize, Jianlin channeled drops of magical water. They fell into the eyes of Dudu's father and mother, and because of that, they could already see their spirit child. The spirit master really didn't lie, and Zhu Yan could hug her daughter. The child was glad that she had been given the opportunity to be in her parents' arms. It wouldn't last long, but it was better than not saying goodbye at all. The mother felt guilty for failing to protect her daughter, and now apologized to her. But Dudu didn't blame her mother, only asked her to stop crying and wiped her tears with her hand. Dudu was in a hurry to share her impressions of the afterlife, for there were many things there that one would not see here on Earth. All three of them sat on the log and enjoyed each other's presence as if it were 1 in the evening. But half an hour had passed. The time was up. It was time to leave, but the mother hurriedly spoke to the spirit. He explained that if they didn't leave now, it would be too late and there would be no reincarnation. She wasn't going to stop the spirit, though. She just asked if Dudu could reincarnate and go to their house, or if there was anything she could do for her daughter. But all she could do was accumulate virtue. It was very difficult to say goodbye, but they were grateful that they had been given a chance to see each other one last time. Jianlin took little Dudu away, and the parents respectfully bowed to the spirit. The live broadcast had a good effect on people regarding attracting them to the live broadcast. Specialists tried to see anything related to the spirit, but nothing was found. On the bridge that illuminated the month, Dudu and Jianlin were waiting for a girl with a container in her hands. The spirit was handing Dudu to this girl. She was holding a bowl of Mampo soup. The sacred soup will help you forget all the wrongs of your past life, for your new life will be very different. The little girl happily accepted the soup, and grateful for Jianlin's care, gave him her toy, a small panda. But the spirit refused. It was impossible to refuse, for Dudu was a persistent little girl. After drinking Mengpo soup, the soul will continue on its way to reincarnation, so it too must accumulate virtue and do good deeds to make reincarnation easy. The 7 days of soul reincarnation were shown live today. The live broadcast is about to end. But before that, the spirit decided to read people's comments. They were completely different. People had a lot of emotions, because they hadn't seen anything like this. Some people really liked Dudu. Some people remembered the Manpo soup, and some people remembered the girl who served the soup. From the back, the ghost girl was extremely beautiful, naturally. This impressed some people very much. It was said that she had been waiting for someone for a very long time, which was why she had been standing there for over 1,000 years. But in any case, you should be extremely careful with her. But the live broadcast didn't end there. Jianlin planned to show the ghost market. The ghost market sold many things, which was very convenient for ghosts to live. From the outside, it looked like an ordinary human market, but the goods and sellers were unusual like humans. Jianlin met the dark spirit Shuki. The spirit looked almost like Lin, but was wearing black clothes. He also favored long hair, but it was red in color, and his eyes and bright yellow like the setting sun. It had been a long time since the ghosts had seen each other, but the two were extremely excited to meet. Whenever they met, the conversation turned to life as usual, but a loud female voice from outside drew them away from the conversation. Everyone was confused. There was a living soul wandering right in the marketplace, one that didn't go unnoticed. A four-eyed monster immediately spotted the beauty and tried to touch it with its huge paws. But Jianlin's hand and Shushuki's hand were ahead of the monster. Against them, he was no longer as big as he was in front of the defenseless girl. The ghosts wanted to keep order, so they did not hesitate to defend the girl. However, they did not hold him much, and the coward ran away from them. Jianlin presented Lin Ruoyi with a mask to help hide the presence of her soul. The mask looked like one of those worn by the Oni. It looked graceful, but at the same time it was frightening with its fangs and horns, and its red eyes and black and green coloring added to the gloominess of the mask. Next time, Lin Ruoyi shouldn't have come here. There are too many ghosts in the afterlife who wouldn't mind eating a living soul. The girl accepted the gift, but she didn't even know the ghost. So how did Jianlin knew her? It was explained by the fact that he was a white spirit. The living soul's situation looked bleak. She didn't even understand how she got here, and who would take her away now. But Jianlin was ready to take her out of the afterlife, so he said goodbye to Shuji. In return, the latter wished him to be more careful. Jianlin carelessly took Lin Ruoyi by the collar of her shirt And then he flew up and dragged the girl behind him with his usual bored expression. The farther they flew, the more beautiful views opened up before them. The enchanting blue sky, the light white haze, and the growing flowers. Lin Rui took off her mask since she didn't need it, and Jianlin moved his hand to her shoulder, and then pointed to a white circle. Passing through it, the soul would enter the mortal world. The girl gave the spirit a grateful look and thanked it. Up close, this circle was like a portal mirror. It reeked of coldness, and the girl was a little nervous and hesitant to enter, but she had to do it, and she did. The mirror portal brought her to the earthly world, literally spitting her out like a foreign body. It was early morning, about 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, as evidenced by the stars and the sun, which was just rising. Jianlin continued to read the comments from the live broadcast. People were discussing about the cute Lin Rui. They really liked the girl. Maybe she had touched the spirit's heart too? Some people even liked the ghost world and wanted to know how to get there. The soul can leave its body for a short time, but if it leaves the body for a long period of time, it may not return. Soul without death, such souls are called living souls. They will not be able to reincarnate. Evil spirits are very fond of eating such living souls. The audience was over 1 million. For this, the presenter received 800 points, and the next task was to gain a heart of faith. He had answered the most interesting questions and could now finish the live broadcast. Spirit didn't consider his job hard, but he earned a lot of points. It seems that the purpose of popularizing the afterlife culture was related to the impact on the mortal world. And now a new challenge for the live broadcasting room: the Heart of Faith. The goal is to popularize the culture of the afterlife. The Heart of Faith means that people believe in the existence of the afterlife and fear it. The current completion rate is 528 out of 1,000. A gift was provided to the presenter. It was a large yin pill. It has the same effect as a small yin pill, but much purer and thicker. Will help make a breakthrough faster. One of these is worth 500 points. Jianlin didn't hesitate long and took it, and why he immediately devoured it. Such a pill produced an interesting effect. It was as if the body was modernized. Jianlin had reached the later stage of Ghost Soldier. This was the peak. The spirit assumed the lotus posture and continued to cultivate, reaching a new cultivation stage. 3 hours later, Mrs. Mengpo issued a task. The spirit could refuse it or accept it. Now that the cultivation base had reached the early stage of a ghost general, Jianlin could now head to the mission center to find out the details. The place called the mission center looked rather gloomy, guarded by creatures with a human body but with a deer face and sharp horns. They were dressed in their uniforms that only covered their bottoms, and also each warrior had a spear. Jianlin received a congratulatory letter congratulating him for reaching the early stage of Ghost General and obtaining the appropriate qualifications to complete missions. After completing the missions, he would be able to receive the corresponding rewards. The other spirits were already standing at the information tablet and scrutinizing the missions. The reward for Mengpo's search mission doubled. Countless treasures were added. Mrs. Mengpo had lived for thousands of years. Only the generals would be able to find the person she needed. No one had even come to the meeting place to see her. Therefore, the spirits immediately rejected this assignment. Manpo's quest: to find a lover. Whoever undertakes this task will receive a lot of treasures. There was also a missing pet cat, for which the reward is 5,000 coins. And one more task: find the lost vacation homework, for which the reward is 5 pork cutlets. Among the ghosts, it was rumored that the people of today were more resentful than in ancient times. If things continued like this, sooner or later the afterlife would be overcrowded. The spirits would like people to go to hell and realize that it is very bad to do evil. And even hell was once overcrowded, but a certain person changed everything, cleansed the offenses, and completely dismantled. The system said that Jianlin had reached the allowing level to take on Mengpo's task. Why wouldn't he try? Well, before accepting Mistress's assignment, he decided to see if there were any other assignments. In the information appeared the main task: the Book of Life and Death. You need to give out the ghost lurking on the ground. The reward for completing it was 30,000 coins. Jianlin thought that this was part of his job. That's why he accepted the assignment. His location: a clothing design company. There was nothing to do, so the spirit went straight there. Work was in full swing in the building. The woman stretched lazily from the work she had done. Her design was complete. A notification came on her cell phone that a live broadcast of the Afterlife Healing Lounge had begun. She immediately turned her attention to her phone. even though it was a little early for the broadcast. Jianlin didn't hide his mission. He was already in the building, and here he needs to retrieve the soul that is in this world. But first, he needed to figure out the reason for her delay. Seeing that the live broadcast had started, people immediately joined in and started asking their questions. But what was the surprise of the girl who worked in this company that the spirit came today? Later, the president of the company would come out to inspect the situation in various aspects. Everyone should pay attention and show style. The employee could see his girlfriend behind the president in the photo. But there was no ring on her hand, which means they're not really related. She doesn't look like a secretary either. Then who is she? The secretary entered the president's office and reminded him that he needed to visit several departments of the company within the hour to check on the employees. Lately, he felt as if someone was hanging on his shoulders, and it seemed to be the same spirit. Mr. Tsai was about to go to the employees right away, but the power went out in the hallway on his way. The receptionist immediately suggested calling the repair service, because there would be a meeting again very soon. The worker continued to watch the live broadcast. You could tell by her look that she was overly focused and tense. But when her co-worker's hand was on her shoulder, she almost jumped with fear. Her phone fell out of her hands, she was so scared. Mr. Tsai is coming to check on us, so everyone should get ready. But the woman about the broadcast decided not to say anything, and only referred to the fact that she turned on a melody from a horror movie while she was drawing. Then she noticed something that frightened her even more. She saw the ghost woman who had accompanied the president so far. But she wouldn't keep quiet any further and literally yelled that she had seen a ghost. Her face was as white as a sheet, and from such a surprise, she simply fell on top of her colleague. A spirit stood beside them, which no one saw. But it could observe everything closely. The president thought it was about him and asked directly, "Does he look bad?" The employee could not answer because she was in shock. So her colleague replied that she had just worked here and had not expected to see such an amazing man as the president. Mr. Kai left, and the colleague was told to take care of Xiao Liu when she woke up, then to go home. It was already evening. Xiao Liu was about to return home and was still worried about the past incident. She was closing her office and didn't even notice the man heading her way. But when his footsteps became closer, Xiao Liu turned her attention to him. The man grabbed the woman in a sharp motion and put a cloth over her mouth so she wouldn't know any sounds. The phone fell out of her hands. There was nothing she could do to resist the man with her strength. And then everything went on like in the movies about kidnappings. The woman was tied up and locked in some dark room, where she now lay motionless. She had a gag in her mouth, and if she wanted to, she couldn't get through to anyone. Her eyes were not closed, so she could clearly see Mr. Tsai, who was wiping a sharp kitchen knife with a serious look. Behind him, there was a girl lying down. Her image was like that of a ghost girl not long ago, but she wasn't tied up, just lying there like a test subject. Xiao Liu recognized the president and began to plead with him in tears. The woman had been unconscious for a while, and only now woke up. The president left the knife by the girl's body and turned to her as if disregarding Xiao Liu. Because of the gag in her mouth, Xiao couldn't say a word. Xiao couldn't speak a word. She could only mentally guess where she could be. Turning around, she saw the other girls. Like unwilling birds, she was caged. Some were unconscious, and one girl decided not to take any chances and sat quietly, or just couldn't say anything. Mr. Kai dealt with the girl and headed towards Xiao Liu, who was shaking with fear. She pushed herself against the wall as if she expected the Lord to do something unpleasant to her. But for now, he just took the gag from her mouth. He didn't think it was necessary to explain anything to her, like why she was tied up, or what they wanted from her, but just asked her directly what she had seen earlier. The ghost girl was still behind the man and enveloped his neck as if she wanted to strangle him. Tsai continued the threat, hinting that her life was now in the balance, but the woman remained silent and tears began to flow from her eyes. It was not clear who she was more afraid of, the president or the ghost. If Xiao Liu wants to live, she should answer his questions, but she remained silent, backed into a corner by fear. The ghost girl kept pressing the president's neck, but it couldn't have a strong effect. But is it possible that if she says she saw it, she can survive? In the next instant, Kai decided not to be ceremonious and roughly pulled Xiao Liu by her hair to make her confess sooner. And then, with all the strength in his hands, he slammed her head against the concrete floor, hoping that now she would speak up. Through the pain and the bruises on her face, she still said. And she saw a beautiful girl above his head, but only just a little. Hearing the answer, the gentleman abruptly let go of the woman's hair, thus she fell to the floor. It was clear that the ghost was haunting him, He could feel it, and had been for a long time. It was as if he'd lost his mind during that time. In the next instant, he grabbed the very same kitchen knife, and already threatened the woman lying there. If she came, he would kill her again. He didn't wound her body, just stuck the knife in front of her face and headed for the exit. The spirit was watching. Jinlin continued to follow Mr. Kai. The man had already reached his home and was resting in bed. Thinking aloud, he had given up on himself. After all, he thought that he would learn how to become immortal very soon. And the live broadcast was still going on. People were enveloped in resentment. They now wished for the death of this gentleman. People decided to handle it themselves. Even hackers had gotten involved, and they were personally ready to finish this man off. It had already been night for almost 2 hours. The hackers had leaked Tsai's location, and the public security team was already at his cottage with guns. The lights had already gone out in his house, with experts keeping a close eye on what was going on. The dawn light is out. It's time to attack the president. Mr. Tsai was sleeping as if nothing had happened, and a spirit hovered over him, as if pondering his next actions. But something made him wake up, and it definitely wasn't Jinlin. In the middle of the night, he saw a huge male shadow with an axe in his hand. The man was familiar to Tsai, so he was quite dismissive, only to wonder what the man was doing here. But he remained silent and glared angrily at the gentleman, and then swung the kitchen knife with all his might. Mr. Tsai never got out of bed, and the man, not expecting, swung the knife directly at his body, but it didn't catch. The gentleman managed to dodge in time. However, he didn't wait either, and ran away so that he wouldn't become a dead man today. He ran and asked the man to stay away from him, but he didn't answer anything, and just continued his attempts to at least hurt Tsai. At last he spoke, but for some reason his voice was not a man's but a woman's. He said that the gentleman could scream all he wanted, but no one would help him. Somehow the gentleman recognized the voice, but he could guess at who it belonged to. Mr. Tsai hesitated, and there were consequences. The man managed to cut off his arm, and it flew off like a toy, along with his clothes. He was no longer screaming, but blood was flowing from his hand in rivers. With a trembling voice, Mr. Kai asked, "Wasn't Fang Lily the man?" His hunch was correct, but there was no candy reward provided. He was afraid, but he held back and tried as much as possible not to show it. He asked Fan Lily to stop. It had all really stopped, for it was only a nightmare. There were huge drops of sweat running down his face, and he himself was almost suffocating from such a dream. He had to stand up to fully come to his senses, and realize that this was indeed a dream. He didn't feel like sleeping after the nightmare at all, so he decided to leave the room. But when he opened the door, it was as if he were not in his cottage at all, but in some box. There were 3 people waiting for him on the way out of the room. They were all in a weightless state, their eyes completely like some kind of monsters. They said they had been waiting for the boss for a very long time and asked to talk. His fear did not recede after the nightmare. It seemed as if these 3 men were more afraid of him than Fang Lily with a knife in a man's form. He immediately went back to his bedroom, with the hilt of a knife sticking out under his pillow. Tsai immediately took this knife from under the pillow, and then he started defending himself against the intruders. He slashed their arms, anything he could get his knife to, just to get them out of here. A few minutes later, they were destroyed. Their heads and pieces of their bodies lay beneath the Lord's feet, and he sighed a sigh of relief, hoping that this was the end of the dangers. Well, there was a sound from across the room. It was the crumbling of the rocks on the cliff that supported the room. That wasn't all. The rock crumbled like bread, followed by the room, and then Mr. Tsai fell into the abyss. But what was that? Another dream? A dream within a dream. Mr. Tsai had a double nightmare. His eyes were bruised, and he couldn't get away from it. It was very hard on his psyche. From behind the door came the voice of an aide, who said that there was some rustling outside. Probably the police. To protect himself, the president kept a knife under his pillow. And just in case, he immediately pulled it out. With slow and timid steps, he moved toward the door holding a knife in his hand. There were many men outside the door, probably serving him and guarding the house. Like a madman, Kai came out of his room and started waving his knife, telling Fang Lily to get out, because he had killed her. But the men didn't even know how to react to this. They stood there scared, looking at the head thinking what they could do in such a situation. Mr. Kai didn't stop waving his knife. He attacked everyone he saw and everyone who got in his way. And at the same time, he threatened that tomorrow, the men from Jinshan would come and capture her, and then she would never reincarnate. The men shouted that they weren't Fang Lily, but he didn't seem to hear them. "If the men aren't Fang Lily, then she's somewhere else," Master continued to desperately call out to her. Jianlin had already met the ghost. From the top of their flight, they watched the madman. Fang Lily can't kill him because her ghost is too incomplete. It will take time to work out the damage. This was true, although in reality he can't die at her hands. But in dreams she will kill him hundreds of times. Mr. Kai didn't stop. He was still holding his knife in his hand as if trying to find Fang Lily. But if Fan Lily kills him, she will be left without anything human, and won't even be able to reincarnate, the spirit told her. She had nothing to fear. She was ready to kill him if she could, and she was not afraid of anything. But the slight reminder of her mother and the fact that she was still waiting for her daughter seemed to bring Fan Lily back to reality. Doubt trembled in her hands. She was still hesitant to make a decision. However, everything had already been decided for her. The police immediately rushed into the cottage, pointing their guns at the president, who was still prancing around in his pajamas with a knife. They were not ceremonious and immediately handcuffed his hands. And then they put him on the floor and pinned him down so he couldn't even twitch. The police found all the girls that Mr. Kai had caged. There was no key, so they had to cut the chain. Jianlin was thinking about something, and Fang Lily was watching in tears. She was very sad that no one managed to come earlier. Fang Lily could no longer hold back her tears. Jianlin looked at her sadly, if he could help her. His audience supported the girl as much as they could. She wasn't the only one who was sorry that things had happened like this. Fan Lily calmed down a little and was able to wipe her tears, and after the spirit offered to go, and carefully placed his hand on her small shoulder. She touched his long finger in return and asked him to wait. She had one last request, to see her mother. The white spirit couldn't refuse her and was only too happy to give Fan Lily one last memory. In the same instant, they flew across the city to the houses where Fan Lily had once lived and found themselves in an apartment. There was a table in the room with 2 candles neatly arranged on the sides of the incense and a portrait of Fang Lily resting against the wall. That same night, the police visited Lily's mother. They didn't know how to break the news, because they were too late. Because Fang Lily's body, "He hasn't been found!" The policeman sadly reported it. The mom respectfully sat on her knees and thanked the police officers for putting her daughter out of a sea of misery. Fan Lily's soul could now rest in peace, at least for that the mother was grateful. Although it was obvious how sad she was about it. The incense was spreading everywhere, making it more and more clear that the room was filled with mourning for a departed soul. The mother was very upset, for her daughter was the whole meaning of her life, and now she was gone. The policemen supported the unhappy mom as much as they could, but how could they help her? She walked the policemen to the door, for she realized that she'd already delayed them. But they were really worried about the old woman, no matter how brave she was, and no matter how much she showed that she didn't need help. However, to make sure everything would be okay, the policeman left his phone number and told her to call if anything happened. Frustrated, the single mother wandered over to the table where an old wooden box lay. Mom would like to talk to her daughter. Even though she was here, she wouldn't be able to get a word in edgewise. Instead, she just hugged her mom, though she hardly felt anything. The wooden box contained Lily's personal belongings that she had made herself out of cardboard and paper. Her mother could only hope that her daughter Lily had settled down in peace and that a life even better for this one awaited her from now on. The people in the live broadcast watched tirelessly. They asked the presenter for the opportunity to guide Sis and even send her money. Such support from strangers could not help but impress the spirit. People didn't stop and continued to write, asking to escort Fang Lily to her final resting place or to do something to help. However, Jianlin was not opposed to such an initiative. Strangers wished the best for the girl. Some still came to her funeral with flowers to support Fan Lily's mom. The girl had been through a lot in this life. One can only hope that in the next life, she will live her best life and eat well. People brought incense and placed it at Fang Lily's grave, wishing her the best. Such wishes did not fall into the air like mere words, but had power over the girl. For Fang Lily, these were not just words, but really sacred wishes that her ghost could feel. The power of desire. The power generated by human beings on Earth in the form of prayers, wishes, and blessings. The power of desire was not only impressive to the girl, but also to Jianlin, who didn't see it very often. Fang Lily still didn't understand if she was really in the afterlife, and was there even an afterlife? So she asked the spirit about it again. Life in the netherworld does exist, but those people whose actions were not very conscientious are sent to be eaten by monsters. If a living soul is eaten, it will never reincarnate again. Those who do evil must fear the monsters, though, in any case, go to hell. The news was burning. There was a bunch of news about Mr. Tsai and his enterprise. His enterprise and family went completely bankrupt, and Mr. Tsai himself was executed. The case of the abduction of the girls was closed. Meanwhile, Jianlin and Feng Lili were standing by the Huangquan Road, where souls accompanied by spirits were already walking along it. Jian gave Feng Lili a small bottle and told her to go to Mrs. Mengpo. The small vial contained tears. Fan Lili's soul was originally incomplete, so she had no right to reincarnation, but thanks to people's prayers, everything changed. The girl squeezed the tear vial tighter, pondering the spirit's words. And in the next moment, she said that she didn't want to reincarnate and asked to continue on this path with Jianlin. Jianlin was not really surprised. Such a suggestion put the spirit in a stupor. He didn't even know how to react to it. To add seriousness to her words and intentions, Feng Lili crouched down on her knees and asked for permission to be Jianlin's companion and help him with everything, as well as catching evil spirits. After pondering Feng Lili's suggestion, the spirit with a mysterious smile agreed. Lili might not have reincarnated, but one must consider that for a job like Jianlin's, she wouldn't have enough qualifications. Without giving, not even a moment to change his mind, Lin took the girl's hand and led the way. The ghosts immediately went through a portal leading into the offending ghosts. Feng Lili has entered the path of a ghost, but she needs strength, so she must go and practice. Once she finishes her cultivation, she can return to Jianling after 100 years. Her eyes were full of determination. She thanked the spirit for the opportunity and was about to begin the start of her journey. Fan Lili said goodbye to the spirit, and the spirit gazed thoughtfully in her wake. Jianlin went back to the live broadcast and read people's comments. They were impressed with Feng Lili's choice and hoped that she would be able to take revenge on her abuser. It seemed as if hell was empty, for all the demons were on Earth. Some people were inspired by the girl's choice and planned to become a ghost like her. Jianlin's plan was to go to hell. On the first floor, you can see the language prison. The monsters, using a special torture tool, pulled out the tongue of a guy who was tied to a pole. The lower you go down, you see more and more brutal torture. The second floor is torture with scissors. The third floor is torture with wood and iron. Fourth floor, torture with an evil mirror. Fifth floor, steam torture. Sixth floor, copper pole torture. Seventh floor, knife torture. Eighth floor, water torture. And finally the ninth floor, the oil bath torture. The devils held a bound man over a boiling bath of oil and were about to put him down. People in hell do not die, but are subjected to constant torture, thus paying for their sins. Tsai Xing himself was bathing in the bathtub. Payback for his sins came very quickly. None of his pleas, promises had worked. Now he must undergo this torture. This kind of bathing was so horrible that sometimes it was better to just die. This was no Dante's Inferno. There were many more circles of hell here. The floors went on for up to 18. In each of them you could see and feel the most elaborate tortures that were not even practiced on Earth. After the live broadcasts of the Afterlife Lounge, crime in Lingcheng dropped by 40%. People began to look at the life given to them differently. Jianlin continued to work on himself and cultivated further. For him, it was a kind of recreation and something he did in his free time at home. His live broadcast reached the 10 million viewer mark, and for this, he was awarded 1,000 points. The notifications kept coming. Lin Yu had to pay attention to it. Many congratulations came in about his new achievements and awards. He was pleasantly impressed. He had 3 new merits: used in reincarnation, used in battle, used in calamity, thunder calamity, and destiny privacy calamity. The reward was indeed high for the done task of the Heart of Faith. The old tasks have been completed, and now there are new ones, like broadcast live for 3 hours, gain 1,000 hearts of faith, promote the culture of the afterlife, as well as the additional task of completing a time-limited mission. Subsequently, you can advance to the late stage of Ghost General within half a month. In order to advance to the next stage, one must take the Yin Pill, which would help in advancement. Lin immediately asked for his balance, which was 2,900 points. This wasn't enough, and Jianlin thought about where he could get more points. Fan Lili successfully registered at the center of the Life and Death books. At the early stage of becoming an afterlife soul, the Master's missions were completed, which meant Jianlin could go to the Afterlife Mission Center to complete the missions and get the rewards. The spirit left his home and went to the mission center to earn points as soon as possible. Jianlin requested his reward for catching the ghost, which was 30,000 coins. as well as the training hall card, 2 pieces, 5 soul stones, and another 200 coins. Since this was his first assignment, the spirit accepted additional gifts. Such a reward was unexpected, and he even looked sadly at the blue stone and the season ticket. The 2 ghosts passed by Jianlin and chatted about Meng Po's assignment. The fact was that someone had accepted the assignment after all. Is this person really powerful enough to accept such a difficult task? What if he has to go down to hell? Meng Po's task, for some reason, gave Jianlin strange thoughts. But ghosts were not allowed to contact hell in any way. Otherwise, they might turn into devils themselves. If they wanted to live long, they shouldn't even think about hell. However, if Manpo's lover was in hell, then everyone would be talking about it. Somehow, miraculously, Jianlin's book flew out, and then unfolded to the right page. There was a portrait of a 56-year-old cook. Chen Dahai was listed as a survivor. The ghosts paid attention to Jianlin. It could be seen from him that he had many merits, and he could easily surpass any of them. Jianlin's merits could be compared to the strength of a great ghost general, who is a dynasty representative and has also been cooperating with the judge for many years. Who knows, maybe Jianlin is also from some dynasty since he is so powerful. On the ground, life went on its own way. The old man wanted to enter one of the elite restaurants, but it was closed. It was odd because the owner only keeps the place closed when it's raining or windy. The granddaughter suggested going somewhere else, but to come back as soon as Chen's restaurant opened. The restaurant was quite old, but it was the only place Grandpa liked. But this made Grandpa angry, because today was his birthday, and he had made a reservation especially for this day. However, he really liked the way the food was prepared in this restaurant, so he decided to wait until they opened. Even if Xiao Chen doesn't come himself, his son comes early and is always here. There was no sign, which meant someone would definitely open it, but a passing woman reassured all the grandfather's hopes. The owner's family had a funeral, so the restaurant was closed and there was no point in waiting. The owner himself, Chen Dahai, was buried. He left this world this morning. The family didn't have time to notify everyone who had made reservations, so they could come tomorrow. Such news completely upset the old man. It was as if he had lost the meaning of life. It seems that the grandfather knew the owner well. So he became very upset and almost fell down if he wasn't supported by his granddaughter. Just recently they had seen Cheng, so why did he die so suddenly? And the restaurant owner was even 10 years younger than Grandpa. The old man was very upset because now he would no longer eat old Chen's soup. The granddaughter looked at her grandfather sadly and didn't know how she could help him. Suddenly her cell phone vibrated in her pocket. This was a notice from the living room of the afterlife. The live broadcast was starting right now. It was like hope for the granddaughter and grandfather, for the white spirit always has answers. The girl immediately began writing to the spirit to help her. But when she saw Chen Dahai following the spirit, she thought that this was truly the end. Chen Dahai is her grandfather's favorite chef, and the girl wanted to contact the spirit to have Cheng make soup for him one last time. The man asked the spirit to wait, for there was a new ingredient in his fish soup. Why don't they go and try it? Chen was here for a reason. The old man knew that this was the time he would be here and had already met him. Jianlin allowed him to stay with his distant relative, but warned him to keep an eye on the time. There were many ancestral portraits in Chen's house, and right now the one in front was the soul of one of the ancestors. To a man, this was something unbelievable. Many years had passed, and the old man decided to find out which branch of the clan Chen belonged to, and what the Chen family restaurant looked like now. Chen was ashamed in front of his ancestor, because due to his incompetence, Chen Jitan did not have time to learn the necessary skills. The ancestor had left a big business, but all that was left of it was a restaurant with an area of 80 square meters. Cooking perfectly was difficult. His ancestor understood that, and didn't blame Chen. However, his father didn't really teach him much about the craft, and he only sacked a few recipes. Chen's son would now take over the restaurant, though he didn't have much knowledge either. The restaurant could fall into disrepair, even though it has been handed down from generation to generation for hundreds of years. It would be impossible to leave it like that. Therefore, the ancestor asked Jianlin to let him get to know the young member of the Chen clan, and teach him the basic culinary skills that had been passed down from generation to generation for hundreds of years. The spirit pondered. The ancestor himself was personally willing to train his heir. After all, it would indeed be a pity if hundreds of years were cut short like this without a trace. After brief thought, the spirit agreed. The old man was very grateful, and the man was shocked at what was happening. No one would have thought that such a thing was even possible. The audience was also jubilant at this turn of events, and were even interested in visiting the restaurant. Not a bad advertisement. The grandfather and his granddaughter were still standing at the door of the restaurant. The old man was still disappointed, and his granddaughter hurried to rejoice him with the fact that it was still possible to eat soup. Only it made Grandpa even angrier. Xiaoniji was so happy with this news that she couldn't string words together. She showed and explained to her grandfather everything she had seen on the live broadcast. Chen Sanwei and Chen Dahai were right there live to pursue the matter. When the grandfather saw familiar faces on the screen of the phone, he rejoiced like a small child and began to wait for the owners of the restaurant further. It was already 2 o'clock in the morning. In Chen Dahai's house, the lights were still on. The young heir of the Chen clan received notifications from the live broadcast. He likes a lot of things, but not that much. Why would he be invited to such heresy? The whole world knows he wants to be a chef, but what if he doesn't succeed? What about it? The art of cooking doesn't come easy. It has to be learned hand in hand. Is it really that simple? The heir concluded that ghosts did exist, so his father probably didn't come. But right now, his father walked in on him from behind, thus scaring him to death. The boy was both scared and relieved that his father was with him after all. There were rumors on the internet that his father would come to teach his son cooking skills, but of course it was hardly believable. But now, the young heir could see for himself. Chen's cooking ability is not that good, so he will be taught by his ancestor Chen Jiatang. The son was still scared, and asked his father to leave, promising that he would take care of the restaurant and his mom. He thought that the ancestors were already very old. Besides, they had died hundreds of years ago. Shouldn't they have been reincarnated? After hearing Chen Sanwei's voice, he asked for permission to enter. The night visit frightened not only the young man, but also his father. Why are there so many ghosts these days? And who is Chen Sanwei? Fearfully, he asked his guest to wait to clarify something with his father. Father often mentioned Chen Sanwei's name. Is it really the founder of Chen Restaurant? I mean an ancestor. So that's who father saw in the other world. Realizing who the young man was dealing with, he resolutely stood up and allowed the ancestor to enter. Chen Sanwei stood patiently and then simply squeezed through the door. The heir was still unable to step back and was still shocked, and even kind of elated. There was a real ancestor in front of him. He had been dreaming just 2 days ago. Everything was exactly as it was now in real life. But the end was sad. The heir apologized to his ancestor and tilted his head slightly as a sign of respect. Chen thought that cooking was really challenging, and so he appeared here to teach everything hand in hand. Meanwhile, Jianlin continued to comment on the live broadcast. He believed that if a ghost had no problems, then it could be trusted. Sometimes, one could even apply to temporarily come to the human world. Time was worth its weight in gold, so the ancestor and heir immediately started training. The father watched his son and his actions, while Chen Sanwei explained all the details of cooking. The secret of the perfect soup was its temperature. It was important that the temperature was perfect. The flavor depended on it. Then they wandered to the farm. For the Chen family's soup, it was important to choose ducks that had been carefully fattened for more than 1 year. And then they went back into the kitchen and continued making the soup, including the secret ingredient. The Chen family's soup was ready, and the heir presented a bowl of soup to his ancestor for him to taste. Chen was pleased with the result and praised his heir as he was really talented. But now it's time to do some testing and open a restaurant, to see if the grandson embarrasses himself. This is where the young man was taken aback. He was not at all ready to open a restaurant. It is one thing when you just help your father, and another when you are responsible for everything. And anyway, the opening's tomorrow. It was a new day. A crowd of people had gathered outside Chen's restaurant, eager to try the restaurant's specialty food. Work in the restaurant was in full swing. Customers were seated comfortably at tables and waiters were bringing them their food. The heir was scrambling in the kitchen trying to make the perfect soup, according to the recipe his ancestor had passed down to him. Granddaughter was sitting at her desk reading a text message. Someone was running late. Grandpa finally got his long-awaited soup after all. The girl carefully lifts the lid of the pot, her heart beating with anticipation, waiting for the moment when she will dive into the world of flavors of her favorite soup. When the lid finally lifts, she inhales a smell that makes her lips automatically smile. The flavors of warm broth, fresh vegetables, and spicy herbs fill her mind, awakening all of her senses and causing a pleasant sensation of hunger. But before eating herself, she helped her grandfather by supporting the plate. He was in a hurry to taste that very soup sooner rather than later, and finally got a taste of it. The old man was as happy as a child. The soup was just like he had eaten decades ago. The heir deserves to be called Ancestor Chen's disciple because it was even better than Xiao Chen's. People seemed to stand still as the line to the restaurant continued to grow. The customers wanted to order additional portions and at the same time praise the owner for his excellent ingredients and cooking skills. Meanwhile, the new owner worked tirelessly. He was anxious because he wanted to please the people and also to convince his ancestors that he was a worthy heir by passing the test. The Predoc watched everything that was going on and appeared in front of his grandson. He was satisfied with the work and now with peace of mind, he could hand over the restaurant to him. The heir in turn promised that he would not let his ancestors down. Chen was pleased with himself and his heir. Now he could rest and rest. There was a boy sleeping in some apartment complex. He lit incense and asked his ancestor to come to him. And the ancestor had indeed come. He was extremely dissatisfied that a descendant of the Chu family was living such an unproductive life. But it was nighttime now. Wasn't it allowed to sleep at night? This made the ancestor even angrier. And it was as if he was becoming more and more convinced of how insignificant his heir was. The child wanted to sleep and didn't understand why his grandfather was so angry. But on the other hand, why did he have to call his ancestor? The old man was serious and immediately ordered him to wake up and take lessons in their craft. How would he look him in the eye in his old age? It was deep night outside. But the ancestor and his grandson labored together, carving marvelous figures out of wood. The night had not gone to waste, and the young man was very glad that he had been able to carve such a beautiful figure of a girl out of wood. Now he thought he was not so useless. Let's visit another apartment complex. The girl spent her nights reading books about medicine. She dreamed of becoming a surgeon and operating on people, thus helping them and saving their lives. The girl was holding a medical scalpel, but someone behind her giggled, insinuating that she could do more than just cut people's bellies. She turned her attention to the stranger, asking who he was. The old man introduced himself as Sun An. The young surgeon was delighted. She didn't expect her ancestor to come to her after all. And the old man didn't even realize she was saying that. It was really quite difficult for the girl to recognize him. But there was nothing to worry about, because the ancestor would teach her everything. The main thing was that the girl should not frame her father. The girl thought that her ancestor's skills were a bit outdated, because things were different in Western medicine. She was sure that she would not only not kill a man, but also save him. After all, nowadays it is possible to cure those diseases that were out of the question before. The granddaughter's confidence was impressive, and the ancestor asked for examples of diseases. For example, it could be smallpox. But not to be unsubstantiated, my granddaughter decided to demonstrate. She showed the anesthesia machine, which is used for general anesthesia, to her ancestor. Doctors can use to monitor a patient's breathing, heartbeat, and blood pressure and the like. Then the ancestor pointed to the glowing lamp. He was just as curious to know what it was. A bed support with a lamp can eliminate shadows in various surgical procedures, so that the operation can go more smoothly. Grandfather was impressed, because science did not stand still and advanced a lot that new methods of treatment were invented. But he didn't come empty-handed either. The old man put a roll of paper on the table, and then unfolded it in front of the girl. There were many different lines drawn on the paper. The granddaughter had told her ancestor many things, and he wanted to share his knowledge with her as well. In the netherworld, Jianlin was on his way to the healing room. His daily task was completed. He broadcast live for 2 hours and got 200 points. It was obvious that he was tired and didn't care about the reward at all. All his tasks were completed, and he received 900 points for it. But there were 5 days left to complete these tasks. In half a month, he needed to advance to the late stage of the Great Ghost General. To make this happen faster, he should have first entered the Attribute Mall. At the store, he was able to purchase 19 pieces of large yin pills. Jianlin was able to walk out of the healing room, and already on the street to consume the pills. They were not only useful, but also tasted good. He still had his primary cultivation card left from his last assignment. It gave him a 2-hour countdown to the start of the primary training hall. Jianlin immediately started cultivating. During this time, he had managed to advance to the late stage of a Great Ghost General. But there was one problem, unfortunately. The current Master Cultivation base was unable to affect the Great Ghost General. This kind of news was not very happy. What should Jianlin do now? Jianlin chose not to be distracted by the notice and decided to focus on cultivation. His immersion was even deeper than before. After all, he was currently using a rookie card. Thanks to that, his cultivation had been successful. Lin thought about taking a chance and taking Mengpo's assignment, but in 5 days, rumors reached the spirit that an ancestor forum had been created. Perhaps it would be quicker to find the person Manpo needed there. Jinlin was walking out of the hall, and some devils were flitting away under his door. It was as if the spirit didn't notice them, and the devils watched him admiringly. They had never seen a spirit have so many points in their lives, and even assumed that he had come to the hall not to cultivate, but to find someone. After all, the initial training hall would have been useless to him. Still, the spirit took a risk and accepted Manpo's assignment. It was all over the news. The portrait of Manpo's lover looked like this. His face was quite serious, but kind. His head was neatly coiffed with long hair, and he had a mole above his right eyebrow and brown eyes. Here are the results of past searches. Chi Hezhi was born in Henguo, never returned after he left for the army at the age of 19. There was also a family letter on the body of the murdered man. Such news reached the humans. The mission was impressive, and the reward even greater. People thought they could handle such a mission. But some were just curious to know what happened in the end. The conversation of the Ancestor Forum was not silent either. Everyone responded to the news. In the earthly library, a young man shrieked with joy as he held a book in his hands. He was glad he had found something. In the aftermath of this mission, a group chat was set up where everyone discussed Manpo's mission. The young man was able to reconstruct a portrait of Manpo's lover, as well as understand the man's history. Jianlin arrived at the river cottage and started reading that guy's comments. The young man had sorted out the key information from the past few days. First, during the Tianqi period under Hezhi, foreign enemies invaded and recruited troops from all over the country. There is a powerful general who stood out on the battlefield. Many times he lured the enemy in deep and caught everyone. He fought bravely and resourcefully and was later named a mighty general. He married a princess. After the marriage, the couple lived in harmony and had a son and a daughter. That is, according to the information he received, Chi Hezhi is a great military leader. The host was impressed by how quickly people reacted and helped him with his case. As it turned out, the lover cheated on Mrs. Manpo. He not only deceived her feelings, but also made her wait, and she was very young. This information was true, and the spirit took it seriously. So immediately I decided to close the chat room and go to the afterlife to complete the task. But one couldn't question this theory either. Maybe people were wrong and the powerful general was not Chi Hezhi. A picture flashed through Jianlin's mind of him with a similar person to Chi Hezhi and Mengpo. It was as if the two of them had drifted into some other space, and Mengpo was just watching them. Chi Hezhi might have been a powerful general after all. That very picture was of a general. And yet, he accepted the mission. You have a visit from an old friend, a powerful general. Isn't this one of the ghost kings of the Western Wenwan Hall? That's the theory put forward by Jianlin's old acquaintance. Hundreds of years ago, during the Great War of the Kings of the Four Regions, this powerful warlord dealt with the grievances on the battlefield and defeated the Ghost King in one fell swoop. He was quite famous, even entering the next generation of kings. But just why Jianlin was looking for him, this was something Xu Shuqi didn't understand. Lin was about to reply when the clatter of a woman's heels was heard. Jianlin immediately turned his attention to the female specimen. It was the same Mrs. Manpo. She clarified who had accepted the assignment. Mrs. Mengpo filled the air with her presence. She was an incredibly beautiful woman. Her well-groomed brown hair and well-chosen outfit. The femininity and strength in her demeanor blended perfectly, creating a femme fatale personality. Any man would take her as a wife, but she was waiting for one. Jianlin answered positively to her question, and now she was looking at the spirit thoughtfully. When the undead saw the mistress, they were convinced that Manpo is really awesome, and she has a lot more energy than the ghost general. The devils were convinced that Mistress Mengpo was much stronger than Jianlin. Someone handed over the finished task, and Madame became very angry. Jianlin's hints were very helpful to Madame. Therefore, she decided to go to the palace. Once confirmed, the task would be considered completed. Mengpo asked the spirit to warn the Lord of Hell that she would soon pay a visit. Madame had already moved in the other direction. Jianlin didn't say anything, only complied with her requests. Except the devils remembered something. Manpo is gone. Then who's left on the bridge? Jianlin didn't let this pass his ears and immediately moved towards the bridge. He was met on the bridge by the doppelganger of Manpo that the lady had left behind. Lin exhaled a sigh of relief, for he didn't have to worry about the bridge. Mrs. Mengpo was not only famous for her beauty, but also for her wisdom and foresight. This situation only proved the obvious once again. Lady Mengpo had already arrived at the Hell Lord's western palace. Her intentions were serious. She stood at the gates of the Lord of Hell's residence and waited to be admitted. The famous General Heji had lived in this castle for many years. The same face as her lover. The general married a princess and had children. But what about Manpo? She had to sit with the letter. Maybe it was a good thing that Chi Hezi was already dead, Mengpo pondered. The mistress was in no hurry to be let in, so she had to resort to force. No one dared to block Mrs. Manpo's path. The guards were already lying on the floor with their weapons, and Manpo continued on her way. And now she arrived at the Wu Wei residence, where the dancing girls could be seen dancing behind a screen. The girls were half naked and literally drowned in the arms of their master, who was twice their size. Their presence had brightened his evening, but now an unexpected guest would arrive. The masked gentleman enjoyed the presence of the girls, but when a servant arrived with a message that someone wanted to see him, he replied in a menacing voice that he was busy. To convince the Lord that the meeting was really important, he reminded him that the girl wanting the meeting was far above the power of the Ghost General. Such a suggestion interested the general. He had already begun to imagine in his mind a powerful beauty. Seeing this, the girl began to remind him of herself, but rough hands sharply pushed the girl away from the man's body. The masked gentleman literally flew out of his room to meet the powerful beauty. In a split second, he stood before Mrs. Mengpo. Now the topic of conversation really interested him. Who this girl was and why she was looking for the general was incomprehensible to him. The man's lustful mind immediately assumed that she wanted to give herself to him. His hands tried to touch mistress's soft skin, but seeing her serious and stern look, he did not dare to touch her. However, she didn't let that happen either, and immediately flung his rough hand away. Madame was embarrassed that the general wore a mask. There were many rumors that he was handsome, in which case, why would he wear a mask? If the lady cared, why didn't the general invite her to spend a deep night alone with him? But Menpo wasn't going to just throw herself into his arms. Well, if the general won't take off the mask himself, then Manpo can do it all by himself. Such a daring approach only pleased the general, and he encouraged the girl. But when she tried to take off the mask, he moved away. And finally, she took the mask off the general's face. Now it was possible to see who was hiding behind that frightening mask. The face was the same as in the pictures of the lover. The same hair, the same eyes, and the same mole. No matter how much the general tried to resist, the mistress was more persistent. Above the eyebrow. He wouldn't allow himself to be without his mask for long and immediately took it away from his mistress. He immediately put it back on his head. He had been injured when he was young and didn't want to scare the beauty, so he explained the reason for wearing his mask. And Mengpo said Chi Heji's name out loud, as if to clarify if it was really him. When she had already directly asked if he was really Chi Heji, the general was not in the least surprised. How could she know that name? Such a question made her even more angry. It was unclear whether the general was pretending or really didn't understand anything. The mistress became furious and began to speak the truth in all her resentment. After all, she had been searching for him for thousands of years. Indeed, how could she not know his name after that? Manpo thought that her lover had lied to her, for she had gone to the bridge and waited for him for many years. And as it turned out, he lived happily with his wife and children, swimming in wealth. Except that the general still didn't understand anything, and was in an awkward position. This misunderstanding made Manpo very angry, so much so that she drew her sword and literally burned with vengeance. She decided to kill him for it and let him handle it from there. But the general really couldn't understand anything, for he had never even met Manpo. But at the same time, he decided to give orders to his soldiers. The general had yet to give orders to his ghost soldiers, but Mengpo immediately moved towards these soldiers who were armed. Can mere ghost soldiers stop someone like her? What nonsense. Mistress easily smashed every devil that stood in her way. She only managed to kill those in front. The rest of the soldiers were already shaking with fear. The general hid behind his soldiers behind their backs. The general hoped that his soldiers would still be able to stand up to Mrs. Mengpo, and ordered them to protect him. They couldn't argue, so they immediately moved into battle. The soldiers were highly loyal because they were literally going to their deaths and they realized it. But the lady had no choice but to destroy them with a single swing of her sword. While there were still some soldiers alive, the general immediately decided to escape. Naturally, this did not escape Manpo's attentive gaze. She would never let him escape. After she had dealt with the warriors, she immediately attacked the general. They were unequal in strength. The general could not make Mengpo an equal opponent in this fight. The general could not make Mengpo an equal opponent in this fight, and a single blow was enough for the giant to smash the rocks with his body, spewing blood. The general didn't understand why this girl wanted to kill him, so he asked it directly, presenting himself at her feet. But for some reason, her gaze was no longer as determined as before. She still had her sword in her hand, but she wasn't going to do anything with it. Some shouting stopped Mengpo, directing a huge stream of yellow energy at her sword. Her sword rusted right before her eyes and was stuck in the ground. Her sword rusted before her eyes and was stuck in the ground. The blood was not red, but black. Her facial expression showed that what was happening to her was unpleasant, but she didn't want to give it away. The Lord of the Western Palace appeared before them. No man dared to come to his wing and make such a commotion. The Lord of the Western Palace was indeed powerful. In truth, a majestic strength lurked in his body that made his enemies fear him. By her actions, Mengpo could have reignited the war between the palaces, and the consequences would have been great. To prevent this, the Lord had to stop the lady at once. Well, on the defense of Mengpo immediately ran to Yan Luo, the Lord of the Eastern Palace. The girl was very annoyed with the old man, thinking that he shouldn't care about the affairs of others. From the events that took place, the spirit was literally choking on noodles. But most impressive of all were the comments of the live viewers. A lot of viewers had a girl lowly. She was beautiful, and everyone wished her well. But Jean Lian had a different opinion of this girl, and did not hide it. The Lord of the Eastern Palace is rather short-sighted. Her decisions are often based on emotions, just like now. As in any world, so in the afterlife there is a hierarchy. Below the strongest realm is the realm of Hades, who exceeds the abilities of all those below him. Initially there is the Ghost level, then Ghost, Ghost Warrior, Ghost General, Great Ghost General, Ghost King, Afterlife, Emperor Realm, and finally Hades. As a conclusion, the afterlife is ruled by only one person, and that is Hades. Sweet Loli was quite strong. Could anyone defeat her? Last time, the spirit remembered that the battle lasted for several days and nights. But what about this time was unclear. A violent fight broke out between the spirits. Yan Luo could not forgive the old man's bullying of her people, and regarded his intimidation as a call to action. She didn't say any more, but just looked at the general. Her gaze made the mask on his face crack into pieces, and he himself fell to the ground spitting blood out of his mouth. This action made the Lord of the Western Palace very angry. But Yan Luo did not feel guilty, for as they say, a tooth for a tooth. If you are treated like this, you should respond in the same way. But did little Lo really want to start a war? She didn't seem to mind either. There was a tremendous amount of power bubbling in her frail hands that was just looking for a move to get out. War was the perfect way to do that. The old man could not refuse her and already prepared to repel her attacks. The lords stood against each other, their eyes full of anxiety before the power of magic. Both know that even the slightest mistake in their spells could have fatal consequences. Slowly, they begin to gather their thoughts, breathing in deeply to gain focus. While the battle between the lords was going on behind them, the former lovers were chatting. The general was trying to figure out if he had met the girl in the human world. He still couldn't remember her face. In his memory, he had never met a beauty like Mengpo. But such sincere words only caused Mistress to laugh. She couldn't believe he was serious. The blood drained from her eyes, but she kept smiling, even though it was fake. It disgusted her to realize that they'd gotten close when she was only 15. All that time she'd been cooking and doing laundry and waiting for him, and now he didn't even remember her, or pretended not to. All those years at her ex's house, her life has been a horror. She'd spent all her best years on him, and he knew nothing. No wonder she was in such a raging mood right now. The general remembered her name Xiao Qing. He was surprised and even angry that so many years had passed and she still remembered it. Now his mouth was watering with accusations against her. He didn't understand what it was all about. Life was as short as a cloud of smoke. Why didn't she let him go? And the place of a happy life had harbored hatred for him for 1,000 years. He had once saved the princess by becoming a hostage to the situation. After all, he only gave the letter because he was afraid the princess would attack her. The general started to make excuses for sending men after her, but it was too late. Mistress's hands began to expose her sharp nails. She knew full well that the general didn't do that, and she wanted to just rip him out the best she could with her fingernails. And in the end, she didn't miss. Her hand went to the heart of her former lover. She slipped her hand in deep enough and pulled out his heart from his ribcage, and from his body oozed a green liquid like blood. Mengpo's eyes were red and burning with fire, and blood continued to flow from them. She now had her lover's heart. Mrs. Manpo captured the heart of her former lover, and he fell to the ground, either from powerlessness or fear. Hundreds of years of being a ghost had not made him grow up. Even if he became a ghost, his heart and mind would remain mortal. Mistress has promised that she will not let him die like this. He will be buried in the fires of hell between life and death. And in the fires of hell, his heart will perish. The Taoist warned him to wear a mask or disaster would strike, but it was too late. The mask didn't save him or anything else. The general was no longer in possession of his body, and the lords of the castles were no longer fighting among themselves. Both watched the former lovers and were surprised. Mrs. Manpo was wearing the thread of destiny. How could this have happened? How will the little girl answer to the old man for what happened? She forgives him for the first time, but if he hurts her people again, he will be in trouble. Yanlo had already flown after Mengpo, and the lord of the western castle was trying to stop her. He really wanted to know who would win. Let's go visit Jianlin. He is in his house and is already eyeing the huge chest of gold. At the same moment, Mrs. Mengpo knocked on his door. Without turning around, he immediately allowed her to enter. Jianlin had helped her fulfill her wish, but she had not thanked him with anything besides the treasure. So she felt indebted to him and asked if there was anything else she could do to help Jianlin. Mrs. Mengpo's generosity was admirable, and Jianlin was indeed surprised by it. But he decided not to miss the chance, and asked to promote him to the last step of a great ghost general. Such a desire was unexpected, and Mengpo questioned whether he really wanted it. Lin answered without hesitation that he did, but if it was truly his wish, then Mengpo would fulfill it. Madame directly gave Jianling ghostly energy and asked him to fully concentrate. A single touch of his index finger on the spirit's forehead gave him great power, all in an instant. Jianlin was now to be congratulated. He had all advanced to the late stage of a great ghost general. In honor of this and for completing the time-limited task, he was rewarded with 5,000 points and improvement cards. When the spirit level rose, the mistress took her finger away from his forehead. Completely by accident, Madame had promoted Jianlin to peak Great Ghost General and hoped that it was no big deal. But Jianlin was very pleased with such an accident, and Mengpo giggled modestly like a mommy godmother. She also presented Jinling with a small pouch. All of this was for him. That was Madame's gratitude. It was rare to see Madame Mengpo so happy. But Jianlin was lucky to be the first to see her like this. Perhaps when Mengpo was alive, she often smiled. Jinlin escorted Madame with a glance, and then began to consider what was in that pouch. She had gifted him very generously, something that even the spirit had not even come close to expecting such a reward. It was a very high price to pay for such a task. However, Mengpo was finally able to ease her soul and go on with her life without worrying about anything. Apparently today, Jianlin's house is open to guests. After Mrs. Mengpo, Jianlin was visited by Yan Luo, who was strangely hanging from the ceiling like a bat. When the master saw Lolo, she jumped from the ceiling without a care in the world. Without greetings, she got right down to business. Except for where Mengpo lives, half of her savings over the years was given to Yan Luo, and the other half is in Jianlin's hands, which is the reward for the mission. One could have guessed that Mengpo was leaving. Mistress will no longer hold the position given to her. Mengpo wants to slip away, even though Yan Luo warned her not to bring up that creep. Now this woman was in for a makeover. Yan Luo herself had personally caught Mengpo at it, and it was as if she was exulting in it. Jianling was scared to imagine what Lolo's face was like when she reincarnated Mengpo. But in any case, that person now had nothing to do with her. If not reincarnated, Mengpo would continue to remember him. Talking is certainly good, but it would be nice to know why Lolo showed up for Jianling. Lolo was extremely curious as to how Jianlin managed to accomplish Mengpo's mission and pull everything off. What was Jianlin's response to that? At this moment, the madam looked frightening, as if she was threatening the spirit. Such communication was in her manner. Well, immediately, she realized what she was doing, and immediately took her hand away from Jianlin's neck. Jianlin had no choice but to answer her question. He said that he was interested in the case, and he had seen the general's portrait by chance, and then Mengpo's assignment, so he decided to give it a try. Yanlo looked at the spirit with her surprised and big eyes, and looked like an exact copy of a small child who had just been shown something new. But then boredly asked if he wanted a promotion. Jian Lin had reached the rank of a great ghost general and had very meritorious merits. He could continue to work in the local government and perform various tasks, or he could accept the promotion. Of course, he was willing to do such a thing. With this, he would be able to earn a lot more points and buy himself a better house and speed up his cultivation process. But just what position would he be promoted to? Yan Luo first suggested Mengpo's position, as her seat was now vacant. Such an offer was not very inspiring to the spirit, for the content of his live broadcast would be reduced to boiling soup. The expression on Jian Lin's face as he listened to Lolo's proposal made Madame laugh out loud. Jian Lin had literally turned white as a sheet, and Lolo had only made a joke to convince him that she wouldn't give him Mengpo's position. Not every person would be able to take on the duties of a Mengpo, but it was a relief for Jian Lin. The word Mengpo was in the name, and the second part of the word meant woman. So this occupation was more suitable for ghost girls. Mengpo soup is only prepared for people about to reincarnate. Souls ready to reincarnate often appear after formation and are very weak at that point, and the ghost girls are able to charm them and convince them to reincarnate fully. Therefore, Yan Luo wanted to promote Jian Lin to a more suitable position. On the table in front of her was a green amulet with a beautiful silver cut. Yan Luo pointed her finger at it as if she had prepared it especially for Lin. Lolo actually gave this amulet to Jian Ling. She wished him good luck and looked forward to seeing what he could do. Mengpo had labored for many years and managed to become a first-class ghost. Would Jian Lin be able to do the same? Jian Lin thanked Madame for his new position and promised that he wouldn't let her down. Yan Luo could see many threads of fate. It meant that Jian Lin was planning to do something. It was these threads that Lin had attracted Lolo's attention. Jian Lin was very grateful to the live broadcast viewers for their contribution to Mengpo's mission. Therefore, right now he wanted to start the live broadcast. Well, what else could he show them? The spirit unlocked a special device to conduct live broadcasts. And to start the live broadcast, he pressed the appropriate button. People were asking the host to meet Mrs. Kusa. Many people were still talking about Loli. It was surprising that they were not at all afraid that Ms. Yan Luo might discover them and freely wrote what they thought. Some people asked how Mrs. Manpo was doing. I thought it was a good spirit to answer the question and explained that she had gone through the reincarnation process and was not here. A notification came in. Someone wanted to know about all the newborns that were born in the last 10 minutes. People actively started to answer the question, and Jian Lin recalled Mengpo's mission. Since the mission was completed and the reward was received, the facilitator decided to send a red envelope to those who contributed to the task. It was a kind of reward for them. The rewards were very different. Some people got coins that they could use later in the afterlife. Some received soul herbs. These were usually used for people who died or lost half of their soul, or who lost their soul for less than a week. Jian Lin was satisfied that he was able to thank his audience. People received notifications on their phones. Someone already received a gift of soul herb. This medicinal material can connect living souls and help them breathe a sigh of relief. It is usually used for the people listed above. Such a gift was given to a middle-aged man. He immediately knew how to use it. Perhaps, thanks to it, he would be able to get his brother back. The man who had received the gift from the spirit immediately ran to his mother to ask about his brother's condition. The fourth aunt's son had fallen into the water 2 days ago and still hadn't woken up, and he was supposed to take a bath only at home. But in any case, there was a chance for him to be cured. The man showed off the soul herb he had gotten from Jian Lin, hoping that it would really help. Unfortunately, the mother considered her son's suggestion as mere heresy and slapped him on the head as if he had become insane. The woman was upset because if the relative didn't wake up, he would most likely have a flying accident waiting for him. At the same moment, the man received a notification on his phone. He received an award in a red envelope. Right now you could get the reward just by clicking open. After the accept button was pressed, quite magically the very same shower herb appeared in the guy's hands. Mom and son stood impressed. It had never been seen before that things appeared from the phone like that. This time the mother herself suggested trying to use the herb. Maybe it would help? The family immediately went to the city hospital where their relative was lying. The brother was already standing by the bedside of his brother, who was lying unconscious. His eyes were filled with determination that he would be able to cure his brother. Mom and Auntie were just about to go outside to talk amongst themselves. The brothers were left alone. The man began to read the instructions on how to use the herb. It was very simple. All you had to do was to put the herb to the person's mouth or nose, and then wait for the result. The man did so. taking 2 sprigs of grass and bringing them up to his brother's nose, with the hope that he would wake up. The soul herb had already begun its effects. A blue haze began to appear near the sick man's face, and his mouth even opened as if he could smell the herb. The soul herb had very strong characteristics and a tart odor. The victim's eyes opened lazily, as if he couldn't sleep anymore. The man immediately shouted to his mother and aunt that his brother was awake. The women entered the room in joy, unable to believe their eyes. The mother could not believe her eyes, and her brother rejoiced that thanks to the herb they had managed to save their relative. The mother of the son was just happy that her child was alive and was overjoyed. The brother immediately ran to fetch a doctor to examine the sick man. What on earth is Jianlin doing? Let's take a look at his cottage. The spirit was sitting in his favorite seat and reading the comments from the live broadcast. The man was thanking Jianlin for helping him save his brother. The doctor said that he would be able to discharge him after 1 day of observation in the hospital, and from there, Auntie would take care of him herself. People went on to write many of their stories that were adventurous thanks to the presenter. Here is one of them. Late returning from a business trip, he took his car. While smoking, he accidentally set it on fire and almost burned it completely. At that moment, he was shocked. The car turned out to be paper. When he looked back, he saw a ghost standing behind him. Fortunately, a coin was given to him from the live broadcast room. He was saved only because he had given the coin. After reading all the stories from his audience, Lin decided to look in his backpack and see what kind of things he had. The backpack contained a morning wand and an enhancement map. Thanks to the enhancement card, Jianlin could enhance the actions of the morning wand, which he did. The characteristics were strengthened, the sobriety of the medium was increased, and the attack and defense power was increased. As the level increased, these characteristics would be strengthened. Lin was pleased with the result. The morning stick was as good as new. Right now, the spirit was planning to go to the Earth Hospital and continue to broadcast live. Jianlin wasted no time, and without turning off the airwaves, he arrived at the Earth Hospital. There was a middle-aged man lying in the VIP room number 308. His situation was difficult because he was wearing an oxygen mask. All the people close to him stood over him and shed tears, but they had given up hope, because he was already dead. This was proved by the arrival of a spirit accompanying him to the afterlife. The grandfather had died, and the boy had already decided to ask about the house. Would they now stay on the street because the grandfather had died? My sister overheard their conversation. She was very angry about the topic. She assumed that her father's house was already about to be appropriated by someone, but her brother reassured her. He considered everyone in this room to be his family. How did the girl even have such thoughts? But the sister's jealousy was immediately awakened. One of them reminded her that over the years her father had taken care of her brother the most. She also said that her children were suffering while their father was helping their brother. He had 3 other sisters, but for the last 2 years he had been the one to take care of his father. There was nothing wrong with his father helping him, because he deserved it. As soon as his father left this world, there was a fight about money in his room. The uncle also got into an argument. She believed that everyone cared for her father and everyone contributed, so why should the money only go to one son? His father's spirit had almost left his body, but he could still see his children fighting over the inheritance. Nothing had been decided yet, and they had already buried him and begun to divide. Jianlin had been present all this time and had seen his children fighting and what their father thought about it. Therefore, he kindly offered to return. Right now, Jianlin could find out all of the great ghost general's capabilities. And first, he wanted to see if he could still return the old man to his body. The man may have wanted to take a break from earthly life already, but he would be grateful if the spirit would allow him to teach his children one last lesson. However, the spirit was only too happy to help the old man and test his abilities. The spirit was only too happy to help the old man and test his abilities. And he did it after all. The man did wake up, albeit with difficulty. The strife immediately ended when my father woke up. The adults felt very awkward after this. To avoid telling the truth that they were arguing about inheritance, it is better to say that they were just fooling around. Of course he didn't believe it. The father looked worse than the devil, and immediately ordered his children to sit on their knees. There was nothing for them to do. They really felt guilty and knelt down in front of their living father. The man no longer seemed so weak and helpless. There was a tremendous power in his body that was impossible to resist. In the end, he reached his verdict. The father donated all his money to charity, and the remaining 10% would go to his youngest grandson. When the grandson grows up, it will be his startup capital, and neither of them will prevent it. It was something unbelievable. Father did not leave his family people a penny and donated all the money to outsiders. The man just gave tens of millions to charity, not a penny to his children. Now everyone was the same to him. His father's money would go to charity, and as for his grandson's inheritance, he would not allow anyone to take away his inheritance. Grandfather has already written everything and sent it to Mr. Cheng. He will take care of everything, but the main thing is that his grandson should not transfer the money to anyone else and continue to study well. The grandson promised that he would do everything and wished his grandfather a speedy recovery. The man immediately laid back on his bunk, his spirit beginning to leave his body.
The former millionaire met with Jian Lin again. He was very grateful to the White Spirit, but now it was time to depart.
The spirit led the new soul to the afterlife, which looked completely different from the earthly world that humans were used to. It was an absolute space filled with mountains, millions of stars, and cool air that enveloped the spirit completely. Before they could go any further, they would need to do something. Jian Lin pointed at something like a black hole that could be seen in space. The live broadcast continued. The spirit decided to visit the city. Lin was immediately joined by nearly 17,000 spectators. People recognized their Dongjiang Bridge. The fact that the spirit was here looked suspicious. There were very bad thoughts going around that someone's demise would happen here. The girl who was standing on the bridge was someone's classmate from the live stream viewers. People did not fail to act and called one of the emergency services to prevent a terrible outcome. A fierce argument started between the girl and the man, the reason for which only the two of them knew. The girl said so many things to her boyfriend, but what did he hear? That she wanted to buy a yellow skirt, and he was fine with that. But what the girl was really talking about was that it was going to be her grandfather's birthday, and she asked her boyfriend what kind of cake was best to buy. Such inattention was very upsetting and spoke volumes. The girl realized that he didn't care about her and didn't care about their future. The conversation was very simple. It was just a cake, and so why should it affect their future? But it wasn't the point. It was the big picture. The guy was inattentive towards his chosen one. To prevent conflict, he offered to choose the cake together and stopped his beloved. But how stupid the guy was impressed the girl even more, and tears sprang from her eyes. Because it really wasn't about the cake. It was about to be her grandfather's birthday, the most important person in her life. But the guy didn't care about anything, so she asked not to follow her anymore. But immediately a notification arrived on her phone. It was like a lifeline for the girl, or rather for her life. In the letter it was written, "Quarrels will not save. It must be said that I wanted for a long time." The unknown number did not lie, because the girl at any time can go to the afterlife. The girl decided not to waste time and went into the living room of the afterlife. She was walking on the bridge and looking at her phone, and the guy was staring at her back, not knowing what to do. The girl often watched the live broadcast, and she knew how souls leave this world and reincarnate. It was hard to realize that now it could be their turn. A clear example of how easy it was to leave this world brought the girl to her senses, and she did turn around to her lover, who was still standing still and waiting for her. Her face completely flooded with tears, as if she couldn't utter a single word, only emotions spoke. She immediately threw herself into her boyfriend's arms, and he embraced her and offered to find a way out of the situation together. He really didn't understand the girl, but he sincerely wanted to understand and meet her halfway. Usually men don't cry, but today was not the case, and a guy stood in front of a girl like this and cried, showing his emotions in front of her. The girl asked him if he loved her, and without a doubt he answered that he did. The girl loved him too, and was glad that she had met a guy like him. She burrowed even more into his chest, as if trying to feel the warmth of his love. The boy apologized because he knew he'd been wrong. He was too distracted, but that didn't mean he didn't love her. Guy had always paid attention to her since he was a freshman. The girl realized that they had entered the live broadcast room, and it was quite possible that now it was their turn to die. I didn't want to do that. But what about Jian Lin, because just now they had cut off his work? People like that are very difficult to deal with. Jian Lin didn't manage to do his job this time, but maybe it was for the best, and people would appreciate what they had. And Jian Lin should study human psychology in more detail. The White Spirit still remained on that bridge where the recent conflict took place. Viewers asked various questions such as, could his colleagues turn on the live broadcasts, and had he finished yesterday's case? According to his information, that ghost inhabits the human world for an extended period of time, and there were people there. Jianlin didn't specify if he could interfere with people's fates. Well, was he really showing his influence this way? The couple was just going crazy. They were already going to get married. Even if they only had one day left, they were happy to be married. But people passing by hurriedly calmed them down. It was clear on the live broadcast that they were not going to die. To make sure of people's words, the girl immediately pulled out her phone and looked at the live stream. The host probably hadn't met any such couples. Did he suddenly crave love? In any case, this may suggest that nothing is impossible. The young boys had been through so much in the last half hour that they were beyond joy. They literally knelt before each other and swore their love, promising that they would not betray each other. Two black magpies sat relaxed on a sign that read, "Danger Zone." It seemed as if there was no one but birds and only a white spirit could walk here. But something caught his attention. People kept writing comments to him about the past case. It was amazing that just 3 words could reconcile a couple. You will die soon. But enough of the old stuff, for the spirit had begun a new mission in a very dark place. Someone's female voice addressed the White Spirit Lord, and he had to turn around. It was a girl. She greeted the presenter cordially and was glad that she had managed to meet him again. She also thanked him for the last time. The girl was excited to meet him because she was a fan of his live broadcasts. But the spirit didn't appreciate her enthusiasm and warned that if she continued as well, she would die. But it didn't scare her for a second, because they would all die one day. Her soul used to leave her body only at night, but now it began to do so during the day. Her grandfather found people who examined her and concluded that she wouldn't live to be 30. The presenter understood everything at a glance. Jianlin came for some other business and completely met this girl. But she wanted to wander around with him further, so she asked to be in his company. It could have been a kind of privilege for fans. For example, from time to time there would be a feedback event for other fans. This could have been a big plus for Jianlin's live broadcast. With difficulty, but the spirit agreed to such a proposal. After all, it was tantamount to being rewarded at the end of the year by the mistress for his good work. Such a simple action made the girl very happy. I wonder how other fans would react to it. The spirits wandered into the building left behind by the humans, where it was very creepy. The girl was afraid of such places, but for Jianlin, it was like a normal habitat. But it wasn't what the interior of the building looked like that scared the girl anymore. It was someone's footsteps. Jianling didn't react in any way, but only took a closer look. His companion seemed like she was about to die of fear. The footsteps were heard, not only by the girl, but also by the viewers of the live broadcast. It turned out that originally this building was intended for the sale of real estate. Well, why somehow people died here? After that, the popularity increased, as there were even rumors that ghosts roamed here. But so far, other than the White Spirit and the Lost Soul, no one had been seen here. On the walls inside the building was painted the number 4 in a circle in red paint. This place really attracted a lot of people, and especially those who liked to tickle their nerves. Some of them were already wandering around the huge building looking for ghosts, but they still hadn't encountered any. Their team consisted of 4 people, and they had a camera and flashlight as well as their personal belongings. The light of the flashlight hit something that surprised the girl not a little. On the wall, she saw a red triangle that was right in front of her. It told her that they had turned back again, that mark they had just left. The girl was apparently broadcasting live and portrayed a frightened face. Jianlin watched the people with some pity, while the girl was rather surprised. The woman continued her live broadcast and lamented to the audience that the ghosts had inhabited the walls and they were trapped. There was no way out. Although it was no wonder people were tired. From the looks of it, they had been walking here for days. But was the ghost in the wall really to blame? The White Spirit felt that there was something wrong here. The ghost girl was a little sad and she thought, why not scare people who were already scared? Noticing what the spirit companion wanted to do, he immediately shouted for her not to do so. Jianlin was clearly not wandering around this building to appear in front of people, much less scare them. The girl was already on her way to the people, but only something held her back. Jianling held his morning wand at the ready and immediately used it on the maiden. The man felt as if he was numb and unable to even move. All that was last seen on the girl was a surprised face and the branding left on her. The lost soul disappeared as if it was meant to be. Jianlin would now wander on his own. The girl woke up on her desk as if from a terrible dream, and drops of sweat ran down her face. She was breathing as if after a long jog. And she couldn't believe that the host had put her soul back in her body. She figured the broadcast must still be on, and immediately found her phone and logged on. The live broadcast of the Afterlife Lounge was indeed still on. Sending him back is the best thing Jianlin can do for a fan. Staying in a place like this doesn't lead to anything good. The probability of entering the afterlife is much higher, so there was nothing for the girl to do here. The host probably knew that she would immediately turn on the live broadcast. Perhaps that was why he decided to warn her, the fan thought. It seemed as if Lin Roy was actually fascinated by the white spirit. She liked everything about Jianlin, but she immediately hurriedly stopped herself from such thoughts and continued watching the live broadcast. Yu He skillfully brought up the old rule of awards first. Lin Zhou had awarded 5 people. Jianlin was still hovering near the company looking for a one-spot adventure. The guys decided to grab a bite to eat and then continue on their way afterwards. Some of them pondered why they should be afraid of the ghost. After all, they could only confirm its existence, but the ghosts weren't just a fiction. Jianlin himself could observe their presence right now. If this place is haywire with ghosts, they make some people hit the walls or mazes, thus kicking out travelers. Others might get scared and never come back, but definitely not these fans. If people see the ghost, they'll start coming closer and closer. Something abruptly flashed before Jianlin's eyes that he only had time to turn around. A black cat swept right in front of his body. From its entire appearance, one could tell that it was very aggressive and even managed to scare the white spirit himself. She landed softly on her haunches and began to hiss and meow loudly, thus attracting the spirit's attention. All this time, Jianlin had been carefully observing the cat's behavior, and when it noticed that it was dealing with a spirit, it became distraught. The black cat immediately turned around and started running away from the white spirit, and Jianlin flew after it. This situation was very strange. The cat wanted to scare the spirit, but it did the opposite, even though Lin didn't even try to do anything to it. A noisy company was playing card games, smoking cigarettes, and arguing about the game. The man was not happy. The game was not going his way, and he nervously smoked a cigarette. His opponent had nothing else besides the 2 jokers. Of course, she was now victorious and laughing happily. The same black cat that had tried to take the spirit by surprise passed beneath her feet. It initially sat quietly underfoot, and then jumped over the girl's body. For some reason, the girl called her Zola. It seemed they knew each other, and this behavior was peculiar to the cat. But someone approached them from behind. The black cat started hissing aggressively, as if trying to scare the intruder. This time, the white spirit was not only noticed by the cat, but also by the human. Jianlin was no less surprised than the humans, but right now he was even upset. Although Jianlin was surprised that the man knew him. The rest of the company was very afraid of the spirit, but the girl cordially invited Jianlin to sit down and even smiled at the spirit. The girl often comes here, and then she came across the live broadcast and immediately thought, do ghosts have such a long way to go? The girl immediately assumed that the host had come because of her. Was there really something she needed to do? Jianlin wondered why she was still here, fending off new arrivals. Her eyes were sadly fixed on the floor, as if she didn't dare to answer the question, as if the subject was very painful for her. Through her tears, she smiled and answered. It turned out that her father had been involved in the construction of the house, but had passed away suddenly. The girl lived in an abandoned house, and it had a definite effect on more than just her. She hurriedly excused herself that she could leave at any time, but there was a certain but, and she hurriedly clarified whether Jianlin was broadcasting live now. The anchor hadn't stopped broadcasting live since he entered this building. Realizing that the live broadcast was still going on, the girl immediately rushed somewhere and asked to wait for a couple of minutes. The young girl seemed as if she was mad. She walked towards the camera and started addressing the audience. Jianlin just stood there and watched this circus, but it was important for her to realize how many people were watching the live broadcast right now. The police brigade was also watching the live feed and asked the girl to report the situation. If asked, she couldn't refuse and chose to speak out about everything. Jianlin continued to boredly watch the girl. She started to speak into the camera. The reason why she is occupying this place is because there is a problem with this house. Her father used to be a construction worker here. After working here for a while, her dad and some of the workers noticed that there was a problem with the building materials. At that time, father told the person in charge about it, but received no response, and the other party did not follow up. There was nothing the girl's father could do about it all. Even if he quit, there would be other people. Jianlin's gaze changed to a sympathetic one, and the girl became completely upset. Her father crossed over to a construction site and died in an accident. She went to the construction site to ask for compensation, but on the way, she fell into a sewer where no people were present. Tears began to flow from the eyes of the dead builder's daughter, but she continued her story. The girl planned to continue demanding compensation, but it didn't work out anyway. Then she thought of the house that her father might have been thinking about before his death, so she couldn't help but come. One could only hope that the relevant agencies would investigate the builder of the house and not let unscrupulous people die because of them. After hearing the story, people were moved. The daughter and father were very unlucky. Who knows, maybe their deaths were planned. But in any case, the Public Security Brigade reported the case to the relevant departments. Lin Roy also promised the host that she would contact someone. For some reason, such a promise brought a smile to Jianlin's face. The girl was glad she finally spoke out to someone and thanked the host for the opportunity. She was about to leave, but Jianlin directed a stream of energy at her. The girl wasn't scared, but this kind of thing surprised her. The next moment, a portal opened up through which they could get to the place they wanted. The boys were scared and shaking with fear, but the girl didn't care. She shoved her friends into the hole, with the promise that in the future, they would be able to play cards all together again. And Jianlin, sending people through the portal, hoped that the people watching the broadcast would realize how easy it was to die. The guys were still in shock. The girl politely said goodbye to the host who was about to close the portal. The portal carried the company of guys to the 4th floor of the house and closed right in front of the guys. Jianlin had just issued them a warning, and they understood it perfectly as they were about to return. After the incident, the relevant agency turned its attention to what was happening, and heated discussions opened up on the internet. Some people bought an apartment there, but fortunately they sold it. The floor in the house was very easily broken. In case of an earthquake, everything would have collapsed. In any case, Jianlin had completed his task and could now collect his reward. He received a rookie cultivation card 6 pieces, a soul stone 10 pieces, and 500 coins. Such rewards couldn't help but feel happy, especially for a completed task. Someone from the back called out to the host, and it probably wasn't just a ghost. It was Qi Yaoyao's girlfriend, the same one he had seen recently. She had decided to stay in the afterlife, and asked what she could do and how she could be useful here. Her father went into reincarnation a long time ago. The girl was only 15 years old when she died. She doesn't even have any knowledge, but her friends are still alive. And basically, she can't ask anyone about different things except the spirit. But if she has done a lot of good deeds, she can go to rebirth. Qi Yaoyao didn't want to stop being human, but she wasn't comfortable with ghosts either. Yeah, being a ghost was pretty cool. You could fly, go through walls, and put up barriers. Qi had learned that by going to the city, but nothing worked for her, and the girl asked to try to live Jianlin's life. It wasn't actually easy, but one could try anyway. This is just a great chance for her. She was happy that the presenter was giving her this hope and decided to think about it. It turns out that it is possible to save people and change the human system. Jianlin can only hope that Qi Yaoyao will achieve what he wants. A few days later, Jianlin was about to go on a mission and retrieve the ghost. Before going on the mission, Jianlin started a live broadcast. Just then, Qi Yaoyao came up to him with the happy news. She had passed the selection process and become a trainee. Jianlin was truly happy for her and congratulated her on this achievement. Yaoyao's qi was actually very weak, so if one managed to accomplish something grand, there would be no limit to her happiness. Even though Qi Yaoyao was currently running an errand, a bonus was being able to admire the scenery along the way and just stroll around the neighborhood. The girl was very happy about the offer, but also wondered how long it would take for the internship to bear positive fruit. The answer was like a thunderbolt to Yaoyao. Her internship must take a whole 100 years, but if performance is good, the duration may be reduced. If performance is mediocre and there are enough permanent employees, the duration of the internship can be extended. The difference in the results of the internship is shown by the effectiveness. It takes a certain amount of time to learn the abilities and familiarize oneself with the relevant cases to perform missions well. Therefore, in total, the internship takes about 100 years. There was nowhere to go. The girl would have to wait patiently and diligently perform all tasks. The sound of meow made the girl mad and even scared her. Could it be that her cat had gone with Qi Yaoyao to the netherworld? The cat's arrival brought the girl out of her trance, and she remembered that she had to go to her internship day, and she didn't want to be late. Qi Yao Yao immediately ran away from the spirit to complete her task, promising to report back soon. Jianlin was not Qi Yao Yao's superior, and the idea of her snitching everything to him didn't really appeal to him. But the live broadcast continued, and today the presenter went to the ghost market to see what the ghosts would be doing before the ghost festival. The viewers really liked the ghost market, as there were quite a few fascinating and interesting things there, and they hadn't heard anything about the festival at all. On the eve of the ghost festival, the yin energy increases significantly. Ghosts begin to bustle about and go about their business. In the near future, it is better to go out less at night, so as not to bump into someone, and thereby not to bring trouble on yourself. The market was very beautifully decorated. Fireworks flowers were scattered in the sky, and bright lanterns were burning in the streets. All the people were bustling about to spend the holiday with pleasure. At the market, you can meet different creatures. For example, a seller with a pig's head but a human body, although his skin was also like a pig's. You can buy from this vendor pork, butchery, fresh meat, and also take a snack with you on the road. Another vendor offered to apply makeup to a girl, under the pretext that he was trained by the best makeup artists. In principle, each vendor was dressed accordingly to his product and craft. The makeup artist vendor not only did cool makeup, but also offered eyeballs. The eyeball was not a simple eyeball, but one studded with diamonds. Definitely, an eyeball like that can make you popular with the guys. But such a suggestion frightened the girl very much, and she immediately flew away as fast as she could, screaming that she had seen a ghost. But was she not a ghost herself? If you walk deeper into the market, you can also see and buy yourself a couple of nice suits. A man with green skin was selling bloody clothes, 80-second aged, and the smell of them could be smelled for the next 100 meters. The market was really unusual and drastically different from the human market. You could even buy a head here. The man came to the market to buy a head because he didn't have one of his own. He preferred the head of a man with a neat beard, but when he wore it around his neck, he elicited laughter from passing people. There is also a ghost festival in the mortal world, and you can buy paraphernalia for sacrifice there. Night had already fallen, and mother and son were preparing lanterns. At the ghost festival, it is customary to light lanterns to light the way to this world, and back to the afterlife for the ancestors. In the kitchen, people were also busy preparing food, cooking especially for the festival, trying to please their relatives and ghosts. The ghost festival should have absolutely all the ghosts come out and roam around at night. Now people can admire the ghost festival. Some people hoped that their relatives would come back at least for this night and were going to prepare for it. People were willing to leave their jobs just to watch the live broadcast of the ghost festival. In the ghost festival, there are many customs in the human world and the afterlife, so people can learn about them. However, the annual ghost festival is the annual overtime ghost day. Therefore, when the time comes, you Pavilion of the Four Halls can Luowan appear. Jianlin calmly sipped his hot drink and sat in his cottage. Suddenly, a notification popped up, saying that the task had been completed. Jianlin had completed the task of the 1,000 Hearts of Faith. Since he had reached the peak of the Great Ghost General, progress had been slowing down. But there would be a ghost festival in a few days. Therefore, Jianlin should hurry up. He needed to make sure he could defend himself in case of anything. Meanwhile, in one earthly city, a man sat on a stool and offered his services in fortune-telling, and a small schoolboy came up to him. The child wondered whether he could become the hope of the future and asked for help in figuring it out. Such a question seemed to put the man in a stupor, and he just didn't know how to answer it, and remained silent. However, the child immediately changed his mind about his question, and remembered the current one. Right now, he had to have a final test in mathematics for the 3rd grade, and he asked what questions he would get on this test. But the man couldn't give an answer to this question either. So he bluntly asked the boy to ask someone else, and slipped him 5 yuan. The fact that the schoolboy did not get his questions was very distressing to him, and he took the money with some impatience. Angry, he immediately left the fortune teller. I realized that his mom was really right. Fortune telling is a scam. The ghost festival was very soon. The ancestor must be very busy lately. The boy thought about the fact that he should prepare something for him. After all, he is also a disciple of his ancestors. For a long time, the 2 women had been looking for the gentleman, and finally found him. Last time he had predicted to them that the woman would fall down the stairs, but her bones would remain intact. In fact, they did. So she came to the old place to find the Lord, but nothing came of it. But fortunately, after a short time of asking where the gentleman could be found, she did find him. The rules were that you could not sit in one place, Consequently, the rules could not be broken. The woman immediately went to Mr. Jian with a case. She asked for her daughter-in-law's help. They wondered if she was pregnant with a boy or a girl, to prepare in advance and buy the appropriate things. But it wasn't really so much interesting to find out who was going to be born. It was just that, after telling my mother-in-law, it became really curious. "Sir," the fortune teller immediately replied, "so the pregnant girl won't be going out anywhere anytime soon. It is better not to go anywhere and to take care of the child at home. For otherwise, it might happen." The gentleman warned the women sternly. Such a warning made the pregnant girl very excited, but she was not allowed to worry. Pregnant, it is better to just stay at home, but if she wants to go out, she should only do so if accompanied. Mr. Jian's divination only costs 5 yuan, but the girl didn't scrimp and gave as much as 100 yuan. At last, the gentleman warned that during the ghost festival, it was better to stay at home, not to go out, or let anyone into the house. The women left, and sincerely thanked the benefactor for his important advice, and he in turn wished them a happy journey. With the fortune-telling done, he decided to finish up and cook something for the ancestor. Perhaps the ancestor will like the dishes and reward him with some skill, thought the lad. After his workday, he went to his home. By evening, there were many delicious and appetizing dishes on his table. It was unknown when the ancestor would come and whether he would come at all. The young man was looking forward to the ancestor's arrival and was very worried whether he would be happy to see him in these dishes. And would he teach him anything new? As an option, it would be possible to see if the ancestor was live. So the guy immediately took out his phone and started to open the live broadcast. Jinlin was in the ghost market. In half an hour, the festival would start in half an hour. A good time for the ghosts to gather. In the Eastern Palace, the Lordess had gathered all of her ghost subjects in honor of this festival. Jinlin had also arrived at the general gathering. The white spirit stood closest to the Lordess, while the black spirit stood behind. Accordingly, Lin stood near the other white spirits. Today was a special day, and the Lordess hoped that the ghosts would show themselves well and shine with their keen minds. Today was different from the rest of the day, and it was necessary to show themselves properly. The job of the ghosts is to collectively go out and patrol the streets. The ghosts must not be allowed to do evil. We need to show the power and authority of the afterlife. There will be a significant increase in energy in the afterlife. We need to be more vigilant. Lolo hovered over a large number of ghosts, and those obeyed her and served her faithfully. The inferior ghosts were more impressed than the spirits, and were eagerly awaiting the start of the ghost festival. Well, it was time, now it was time, so said the mistress. And her subordinates were only too happy to obey her. The gates of the ghosts were now open. The inferior ghosts were literally creating a crush, trying to move forward and pushing each other. Some of them had their heads blown off, and others were looking forward to shaking their old age. Zhonglin had gotten ahead of all the evil things and warned that the ghosts were already here. This meant that the eyes of the afterlife would be on alert. They shouldn't be presumptuous. Everyone was well aware of this, but a reminder was not unreasonable. There were indeed a lot of ghosts. Even first-rate ghosts came out, and there are also a lot of second-rate ghosts. It's not going to come out this year to do everything. The guy was just walking somewhere, and a ghost came out of the wall with a scary face and a tongue sticking out. He was trying to scare a man, and he succeeded. But at the same moment, Jianling appeared and elbowed the ghost in the neck, so that the false jaw fell out. The spirits were on guard for a reason, because it was forbidden to scare people, but no one was following these rules. This ghost was no longer allowed to walk around, so Jianlin bagged it and took it away with him like some unwanted trash. In the middle of the huge high-rise buildings, some headless body was fumbling around, trying to find his head. There was a sign around his neck that said, "Unlucky," which I guess was basically what it was. In one of the apartment buildings, a woman was sleeping in her room. She had a slight smile on her face, and it looked like she was having pleasant dreams. She could see her womanly fist slapping the ghost in the face, and it could do nothing against her strength. It seemed to be a battle she enjoyed. Jianlin, with a bag on his shoulder, flew near the residential buildings and passed a garbage can, from which a small frog looked out. It felt as if the appearance of the spirit and ghost had excited it. Froggy climbed out of the trash and crouched on the sidewalk. Ghost Festival is a day for the freedom of the afterlife and for ghosts to come out. The ghosts have been looking forward to this day, and as a result, they can't live their lives to the fullest. Meanwhile, in the villa, the gentleman, the fortune teller, was still waiting for his ancestor, who never came. Jian watched his phone and followed the live broadcast. but there was still an ancestor behind him with some kind of bag on his shoulder. But he couldn't see him. The ancestor introduced himself to his grandson. He was proud of him and praised him, and at the same time put the food prepared especially for him into his pouch. The old man thought that he was unlikely to be able to learn more in such clothes, so he should try harder. The old man felt that he could hardly learn more in such clothes, so he should try harder. The ancestor was about to leave his grandson. The boy still sat hungry and asked for permission to try the dish, which had cooled down and probably wasn't so tasty anymore. The chicken tasted good. If he wanted to learn more, he should study harder. And yet the boy had received praise from his ancestors that he had not expected. Meanwhile, in another apartment building, an ancestor came to see the boy too. He was angry as usual when he saw his grandson worshipping the kind of garbage he had made last time. The boy finally finished the statue of the girl. He hoped his ancestor would be really pleased. But it wasn't like that. It seemed as if the ancestor was disappointed at all and angrily threw down the statue. The ancestor flew away from the boy and said it was a stupid thing to do. Now, the boy felt like he'd been humiliated. It is expected to rain in Tianjin. The grasses can be seen from afar, and there is no one nearby. One righteousness, one li, one boat, 1 foot, 1 inch circle. The journey of the sun and moon from which all things come, and even the stars shine because of them. It was a poem by a young boy who was writing it in a notebook and watching live from the afterlife in parallel. An ancestor also visited the young man. He heard a poem his grandson had composed and praised it. The poem was indeed very sweet and romantic. The presence of a ghost, even if it was your ancestor, really scared the young man. He literally turned pale with fear and almost fainted. The ancestor was very worried about his condition and immediately approached him to see if he was all right. But the boy did not answer anything, but only cried out in fear. The live broadcast made him feel like he was dead. Maybe it's not just his ghost ancestor, but the anchorman as well. But in fact, the ghost just appeared too abruptly. He was passing by and heard these amazing poems, which couldn't help but attract his attention. He expressed his deep gratitude. Not to continue scaring the guy, the ghost immediately disappeared, leaving behind a mysterious blue haze. The unexpected visit of the ghost made the boy go into a panic. He literally wrapped himself under the blanket with the hope that he wouldn't be touched, but it didn't help because he was still trembling with fear. Today was the Ghost Festival, and the disciples wanted to see Qin Shi Huang and ask him to lend soldiers and horses. The disciples asked their teacher various questions about ghosts, but he was in a trance and saliva was already flowing from his mouth. All the ghosts in the presenter's live broadcast room are human. The students hoped that the teacher would be able to give them answers to their questions. Today he told them that today's Ghost Festival was chaotic. Would the presenter still be able to come to them? But there was something wrong with the teacher, and the students immediately picked him up and escorted him to the medical room. Meanwhile, in one of the high-rise buildings, the guy was already resting, getting ready for bed. He watched the live feed of the Afterlife Lounge intently. Jianlin was still carrying the ghost bag. Watching him was always interesting to people, so the number of his spectators kept growing. Well, something distracted the guy from watching the live feed, and he turned his head to the side. A bloody mark had formed on the window from someone's hand. It couldn't help but be frightening. Behind one bloody footprint came another. This did not leave the young man alone, and he stared across the window. A ghost appeared right in front of him, leaving his handprints on the window. It was freezing cold. The ghost was nightmarishly terrifying. It demanded total submission from the man, and it was no joke. The guy wasn't confused, and immediately started writing a live stream, asking Jianlin for help with the ghost. The ghost continued to threaten and came closer and closer, demanding that the boy give himself up. The ghost also didn't realize that the white spirit was so intimidating. However, he could understand it now, for the white spirit was behind him. Now it wasn't the guy who was screaming in fear, but the ghost himself who had seen the white spirit. Jianlin was feared by many people, especially those who deliberately broke the rules. Jianlin didn't roam the mortal world by himself. He also had spirit companions. They helped him pack the ghost with a bag of rope. The ghost didn't look so confident and brave anymore as someone stronger than her had appeared. The spirits put a sack over the ghost's head, not even giving him a chance to see anything, and then they dragged him to their afterlife. Jianlin threw a kind of sad look at the boy while pressing his fists, and the young man stared back at him, not realizing what had just happened. In the same instant, the white spirit turned around and flew forward, and the boy stared in his wake. The kid's room was pretty noisy, so his mother stopped by and caught him off guard. It was a very hot night, so the young man wet his pants, and this did not go unnoticed by his mother. She didn't swear at her son, but she didn't understand why such a grown man was still peeing his pants. There was no point in explaining what had happened. Mom simply asked him to take off all the sheets and duvet covers and clothes and then throw them in the washing machine. In the middle of the dark night, Jianlin was still on the ground and guarding the ghosts from harming people. People were impressed with how the host saved people from ghosts, and that was what had been discussed recently. Jianlin was indeed very quick to react when people were being attacked by ghosts, and as soon as he saw it, he would immediately show up to help people. Whenever the festival started, the hosts must patrol all corners of the world to ensure that no problems would occur. Jianlin was passing by completely by chance, but managed to bump into a ghost. Many people wanted to see spirits patrolling at the Ghost Festival. However, the presenter himself offered to show this, and the audience only supported the idea. Jianlin flew straight ahead and continued to patrol the area, but suddenly he saw something unexpected. There was a man hovering on a balcony from one high-rise building who was about to fall and crash. No, it wasn't a man. It was a real ghost who had come for an innocent soul. It was late at night, and the girl was sleeping in her room without a care in the world. The ghost began to call her name, but she didn't seem to hear. Then he decided to move closer and touched her hands. She was still asleep, but for some reason, she called the ghost as dear. The man told the girl that it was time to take the child away, as he could not be left alone now. The child would never see them again. Suddenly, the girl opened her eyes and realized that there was a ghost in front of her. When she realized who she was in the same room with, you started screaming loudly in fear and crying. Even the ghost himself became frightened at this turn of events. But Jianlin didn't just leave it at that. He used his morning wand on the pregnant girl. Thanks to this, her spirit returned to her body, for it was too early for her to leave the earthly world. The ghost was left with nothing and disappointed. But those who make a fuss aren't just left to wander on. You've seen what happens to other ghosts who try to hurt people.
This time was no exception. The ghost was put on a huge sack and tied with a rope so that he would not run away.
With the help of his magic, the white spirit managed to send him to the netherworld so he wouldn't hurt anyone else. It was what people call a ghost spirit in this world. Once the soul is separated from the body for a long period of time, the body will turn into a vegetative personality, and the ghost will become a wandering soul of the lowest level. Catching ghosts still continued. The white spirit even got tired of this job and didn't try to catch ghosts, but just put it in front of the fact. Would the ghost jump on its own, or would it be forced to jump? However, the ghost had no point in stalling and agreed to jump into the bag himself. Outside the back alley, someone was offering to eat a goodie in some girl, and it was naturally heard by the spirit. The ghost promised that if the girl ate the treat, nothing would happen to her. It's best for a ghost like her. After she tastes it, she'll think it's a really good product that's only available at the Ghost Festival, persuaded the interlocutor. But isn't she cheating? Of course not. After all, she was convinced of it. Jianlin watched the girls with displeasure, but did nothing. Still, the girl tried this treat and she really liked it. The joy of tasting the treat was short-lived, for a white spirit approached them. For some reason, Jianlin's presence scared them a lot, and it was as if they didn't know where to go, as if they had committed some kind of crime. All the goodies sprinkled out of the girl's hands, and they began to justify themselves to the master in a hurry. They were the most ordinary pills that the girl had prepared, so why did it scare them so much? To prove her innocence, the girl gave Jianyu Lin's pills to try. He took one of them and looked closely at this pill. He hadn't let out a word until now, and the girls were very much frightened, and now he was also silently looking at the pill. Jianlin put the pill back into the girl's hands and explained that once a year they could take such a pill. He did not linger in the place any longer and flew away. The girls bowed respectfully to the gentleman and wished him a happy journey. There are many lonely souls in the afterlife that are potentially endangered. Plus, many signs are trivialized by the lack of food. Just now, it was an appetizer prepared by a ghost. There was nothing forbidden in it. Ghosts work the afterlife and get paid. They can contact other signs to buy back certain foods. People continued to write their comments, and Jianlin read everything carefully. The onlookers were surprised that the ghosts were also eating and digesting food. Someone even had the idea to burn some paper money for Grandpa and other ancestors. The Ghost Festival countdown continued with 1 hour left. The Ghost Festival will end in this hour. Jianlin will continue to broadcast live and show the viewers what the ghosts will do when they are about to leave. Near the narrow but high gate stood in a single row a multitude of white spirits, and in front of them a huge line of people, of completely different ages and sexes. An inferior spirit burst into the atmosphere of calm among the people and literally started shouting like mad. With an abrupt movement, he removed his neck head, which looked like something crazy to an ordinary person. This ghost only had 1 hour left. He wanted to scare as many people as possible. And right here, he decided to make an appearance. But it seems he's about to be interrupted by a white spirit. The ghost was digging his hands into his head and was about to show his brain. The spirit did not watch this performance for long and immediately got down to business, for this was his debut. He spared no effort in hitting the ghost's head so that he would realize the full power of the inhabitant of the other world. Ghosts, and straight up decided to create a concert. And they didn't look scary at all because their actions were clumsy and ill-conceived. The ghost spirit's hand slipped completely by accident, but the other ghost wanted to get another smack on the head. A piece of the log did indeed hit the top of the ghost's head, so much so that his eyeballs nearly popped out. The ghost confusedly rubbed his head, which was already in place, but with a bump. The people on the sidelines giggled at him as if he were a buffoon. However, the other ghosts didn't want to be left out, and decided to play something exciting too. It wasn't just a festival. It was a day when ghosts could behave as they pleased, like children. They parodied the spirits who were supposed to be watching them, and were not at all afraid of getting anything for it. The giant spirits were literally crushing the ghosts with their palms. Such were their games. The entertainment wasn't really for humans, but the ghosts liked it, and they didn't mind having fun once a year. The place where the ghosts were located had a very strange atmosphere. Some of the spectators thought that this was what the end of the world looked like, because it was so scary. The dark spirit is a first-class ghost. He happens to be the leader of a group of ghosts, and there is a very powerful energy coming from him. No wonder many viewers were quite creepy watching the live broadcast. But Jianlin wasn't really affected by such a thing. Well, now the host wanted to show the audience a few ghosts who were about to leave this world. Jianlin flew in the appropriate direction and landed on a tree. Through the window, he saw a woman in her old age looking at someone's picture. It was a picture of her son. She hoped he had come back to see her today during the Ghost Festival. The son did visit his mom, hugging her tenderly and promising that he would visit her again next year. The male ghost sat with his forehead resting on the tombstone. On the tombstone was a picture of a very young child named Sue, only 3 years old. But unfortunately, the time had come. 1 hour was completely up and all the ghosts had to go back to their homes. Whether they wanted it or not, space itself was taking their spirits away from the earthly world where they had once been human. Time passed the same everywhere, both in the ghost world and in the human world. The festival was over. It was time for the ghosts to go home. Jianlin walked over to the huge gate where the ghost patron sat. That was all. The presenter decided to end the live broadcast and said goodbye to the audience. Today he showed them a lot of interesting things that people could not even imagine. Thanks to the live broadcast, Jianlin was able to complete the afterlife culture spreading task and obtained 200 points. The Heart of Faith task was also completed. He had broadcasted live for 2 hours and received 600 points. Jianlin did his work with gusto and still easily earned himself points, thus doing a good deed. While Lin was receiving the rewards, then Brother Weizi was on his way over. His condition was not good. His spirit was battered, his mouth was bleeding, and he was holding the elbow of his left arm with his right hand as if it was also hurting him. Well, if he was alive, he's fine. He actually hurt himself on a mission. The spirits continued on their way together, and Weizi continued the story. He had to take his son away from an elderly woman. Any high-paying job is very dangerous. When he was alive, he was constantly hungry. So now he feels uncomfortable if there is no food at home. Any assignment brought a lot of trouble, but Wei Qing should be more careful. Every time he handed over a task, one would have to give some reasons, work out the results, and so on. During the last assignment, the spirit had to start a battle and ask the ghost why he became like that. It was very funny. Anyway, these are evil spirits. Nothing good should be expected from them. Wei Qing's story made Lin laugh, for the situation was indeed funny. Rewards were always nice to receive, and this time especially after such a task. The spirits were still facing each other, but Wei Qing shook his head sharply as if he was checking if there were any prying ears. Then he moved closer to Jianling and began to speak in a whisper. There were rumors that Miss Yang Luo wanted to find out the reason for the ghost's mutation. When he had time, Jianlin should look into the history of the afterlife. He might find a lot of interesting things there. The spirits sometimes helped each other and exchanged secret information from time to time. It was a kind of friendship like on Earth. Wei Qing said goodbye to Jianlin and left to carry out his mission. leaving him alone to think about what he had said. Once the familiar spirit left, Jianlin took out his favorite mission book. He had a new job and the usual routine of taking people's souls. This time, he was a man named Liang Zhen, who was 32 years old and a police officer. Jianlin slammed his workbook shut and decided to start the live broadcast. It was a white day on the ground. Two men of age were playing a game of checkers. The guy on the motorcycle was Liang Zhen, the same policeman whose soul must leave this world. Liang Zhen really hoped that his uncle would win this game. In gratitude for his support, his uncle decided to invite his relative for a drink right tomorrow. For the guy, it was a perfectly ordinary and carefree day filled with work routine. His work radio rang in his pocket, and right now he was passing on the bridge. He couldn't not pick up the phone, so he immediately pulled a walkie-talkie out of his pocket and answered it, waiting for a response. The commander said that he saw him in the live broadcast room, so he ordered him not to move and warned that very soon his colleagues would be near him. Liang Zhen looked excited, as he didn't even realize which live broadcast room he was talking about. The commander explained that he was referring to the Afterlife Healing Lounge. Behind the policeman, a strange couple passed by, which Liang Zhen noticed while still talking on the radio to his commander. Liang Zhen asked the commander not to be nervous because it was unknown whether he would definitely be victimized. And could anything happen in a small town like this? The policeman pondered. Still, he had to wait for his colleagues to arrive. The walkie-talkie was still on, but something made Liang Zhen startled. The children were swimming under a bridge in open water. They weren't just swimming, they were practically drowning. Liang Zhen immediately took off his jacket, going to come to the aid of these little ones. The walkie-talkie fell to the ground and the commander shouted to his subordinate not to move, as if he had a premonition of something terrible. But it was already too late, because Liang Zhen immediately jumped into the water without even thinking, and practically saved the girl. He left her on the shore and told the girl not to worry and to wait for her brother on the spot. Jianlin was already on the shore too and was watching what was happening. The little girl was out of her mind. She was in shock and very worried about her brother. Tears were pouring from her eyes. And the policeman immediately swam to rescue the boy who was about to drown. Liang Zhen swam as fast as he could and finally reached the boy with his hands. But he continued to yell and cry. The policeman put his arm around the drowning man's chest to make it easier to swim. The depth of the sea was not shallow, and the water was therefore quite cold. The lifeguard's strength was running out and the waves were starting to rage more and more. It seemed as if Liang Zhen had decided to do something about it and ordered for the boy to hold on. He started lifting the guy up so that less water would get in his face and he wouldn't choke on it. Fortunately, the police literally came running to help. The waves were raging under the bridge and Liang Zhen could have been swept under the waves and never swam out. The distance to the shore was not very far, but there was almost no strength left. Maybe the policemen would still be able to save their colleague. The first thing they did was to take the boy that Liang Zhen had handed over. But the guy himself had already sunk into the water, unable to keep afloat. But someone's hand held his body up, literally preventing him from falling into the hands of death. Fortunately, the police officers managed to pull out both the children and Liang Zhen, who was followed by the spirit of death. He was indeed pulled out, but was he still alive? The boy began to be pumped out, and he began to cough up the water that was in his throat. The baby was alive, and that's the most important thing. What about the lifeguard? The guys tried to pump him out of the water, but he wouldn't regain consciousness. No matter what his colleagues did, Liang Zhen still wouldn't wake up. People couldn't see, but for that Jianlin could see his spirit leaving his body. Liang Zhen immediately recognized the presenter who was hovering over his body. People close to him continued to pump his body to bring him to consciousness. But he's dead properly. Liang Zhen could say something if he wished. The policeman politely introduced himself and gave his name and what line of work he belonged to. Liang Zhen was grateful to Jianlin for everything. The policeman addressed the spirit as if he was at work and saluted. Jianlin had expected anything, but not like this. Surely people had never reacted to their deaths like this before. The policeman was thankful because, thanks to the live broadcasting room, the dead could find peace in time and the injured could get timely help. It was a new hope for people. The Ghost Festival opened up a new world to mankind. Live broadcasts made it possible to watch deaths. But Liang Zhen had no idea that it would soon be his turn. Jianlin was impressed by the former policeman's statements, but he thought that it was just his job and nothing more, and yet Liang Zhen was doing the same thing. Not only the White Spirit, but also the live broadcast viewers were impressed by Liang Zhen's words. And Jianlin wondered if the deceased had anything else to say to the viewers. And he asked parents to keep a close eye on their children's movements during the summer vacation to prevent accidents. Liang categorically forbade letting his children go alone to any body of water. Also clarified that if children want to go swimming, they should definitely check that the water is clean. He hoped that parents and their children would pay attention to this, otherwise the cost could be very high. He had nothing more to say. He could not express himself otherwise without leaving a word of protection. In front of his body, police officers saluted the deceased. The children who stepped away from their bath did the same toward their savior. A woman and a small child ran to the man's body. Tears sparkled in her eyes when she saw her husband lying there. Their couple was supposed to have a long and happy life, and after retirement the husband promised that he would always spend his time with his wife. But he did not keep his word and died. The son didn't realize it was his father at all. Dad had promised him that he would come home early from work today, and he always kept his promises. He couldn't be here on the beach lying down. The son was running somewhere away, and Liang Zheng felt as if he wanted to go over and touch him. But if he wanted to see them again, he shouldn't move 10 meters away from his body. The policeman, however, ran after him to make sure the child didn't do anything. Thanks to the live broadcast, his family can see and hear him, but what will he say? A co-worker was already watching him, waiting for the deceased to say something to them. The wife was still crying, and the policeman remembered that he could see Liang during the live broadcast and showed the widow. The live broadcast was like some kind of ghostly hope for this woman. When she saw the spirit of her husband and her gaze softened a little, her hands were shaking as she held the phone and looked at her husband. He himself was confused, not knowing what to say to his wife and child. But his wife knew, and called Liang Zheng an idiot. Only after saying that, she cried even more. She literally fell to the ground, clutching the phone to her chest, while the spirit of her dead husband hugged her, trying to show his love. Long Chen himself cried. He was very unfortunate to leave his family, but his wife understood that it was his choice. She should have been ready for this day since she married him. Liang Zheng had nothing left but to thank his woman for her understanding. But what will happen to the son? The police officers told the child that he would be able to see his daddy, and now he was hopefully asking his mom about it. Was that really true? The mom showed her son a live stream where the father was in the live broadcast. But the son did not understand why he was on the phone and not next to them. Little took the phone in his hands and looked closely, as if trying to see if it was definitely his father. Dad explained that he only had 3 deaths. The first is when his heart stopped beating. The second is during the funeral. The third is the final death. It happens when no one else remembers him. As long as the son remembers his father, he will live. The boy promised that he would never forget him, so he would not let him die. Now the mother was under the protection of her son. Since he was a man, he took responsibility for this task and promised to always protect his mother. The father was proud of his son and loved his wife very much. You could read it all in his gaze. Liang Zhen thanked the host once more and hoped that it would still be useful in the future. But if the man really wanted to thank the spirit, he could help him. Take care of your next life and keep your conscience. A pouch with a single inscription appeared in the spirit's hands. Right in front of his eyes, Jianlin was performing some kind of magic. This pouch was designed to store one's soul. You can temporarily store your soul in it. The first soul had been taken away, it was time for the second. Jianlin found himself in some apartment. There was a lot of scattered stuff, moldy food and sushi pizza boxes. No one had taken care of the house. A middle-aged man could now be observed. He was a real gambler. He made himself comfortable in his chair and opened his smartphone and started reading the chats. The group he was in was actively corresponding with each other. Although for a long time the people in it were silent. Someone had set a record of 10,000 a day. For this man, such a record was perfectly easy. He immediately left his phone number, with the confidence that he would be able to break and increase that record. One message and he immediately took the call, opening his laptop. The man began diligently rattling the keyboard and staring intently at the screen. His fingers were literally swimming across the keyboard. He was a professional gamer, so it was no surprise. He was completely immersed in the game. It was the kind of thing that brought him genuine pleasure. But everything has its time, and he was tired of playing the game too and stretched lazily. He didn't become a great god, and the book was no longer necessary, the man pondered. It was easy to switch from his laptop to his phone. He was constantly getting messages from different chat rooms, and especially from the game chat room. But this time, he decided to write. The man created 2 more chapters, which were the last. But he was not going to publish them, he was only interested in other people's reactions. The ringing of the doorbell brought the man out of his musings. It was a delivery. I should clarify, very fast shipping. The guy paid and took his food without even realizing it. He immediately returned his attention to the phone. but now it was as if the world had disappeared for him and everything went black in his eyes. Out of his hands fell his cell phone and the delivered food, and then he fell. The man was sprawled on the floor, unable to move. He was still alive, but he couldn't get up off the floor. His body was freezing, veins and cold sweat running down his skin. He screamed with all his might, but it was probably a mute scream. In the middle of his house, he was lying near scattered food. He had no one to help him even get up. Somewhat painfully, he rubbed his head as if trying to figure out what had happened to him. His body froze with a contorted face, and his spirit could watch it all as he reached for somewhere with his hand and tried to scream. Just like that, in the middle of the day, you don't expect where death will be waiting for you. He had no health problems and the man was very young. At that moment, he thought about the fact that he had not even spent all his savings. No matter what kind of person Jianlin was, he was always greeted with a sad smile. The deceased immediately recognized the host. It seemed as if everyone knew him. The guy didn't want to go to the afterlife because he hadn't even gotten his story fully published. But did he really care that much about the story? The boy answered unreservedly that it was. Jianlin was favored by the Spirit Lord and gave the dead man 7 days. The guy was very grateful for this opportunity and bowed respectfully to the Spirit Master. He was given 7 more days to live. The guy often watches this broadcast and understands the whole system. However, he thought he could do a lot in a week. The guy was already glad that he could live a little longer. And Jianlin, with a bored, ordinary look, replied that it was time to depart. Has he changed his mind about giving the guy time to live?